Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. Good evening, Placerville, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 28th regular meeting of the Placerville City Council. We are going to adjourn into closed session, but before we do that, is there any member of the public that wishes to make a comment on any of the three items on our closed session agenda?
And Mayor, I will announce it appears we have 0 attendees, so I think we're safe going into closed session.
Okay, we will adjourn into closed session, so I'll see everybody back here after we log into the other. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 28th meeting of the Placerville City Council. Will everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
and
liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you, Regina, for getting the flag as well. Okay. Regina, will you call a roll, please?
Mayor Saragosa,
Here.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Here.
Councilmember Acuna,
Here.
Councilmember Borelli,
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Moving right along, we're going to go to item 3, announcements and presentations to the public. And item 3.1 is an update, public records request update, and Ms. O'Connell has this for us. Thank you, Regina. Oh, Regina, you're on mute still.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So as you can see on the staff report for item 3.1, there are 4 open public records requests. Item 1 is from the Wapumis Nisenan Miwok tribe, which you're familiar with from the last meeting. We talked about that one. That one is being produced on a rolling basis, and we're still working on that one. And the city is also currently working on items 2 and 3 from Lisa Perticchese requesting documents relating to the Upper Broadway Bike Lanes project. And item number 4 is from Evelyn Veerkamp, who is also requesting a document from the same project. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Council members, questions for Regina? Okay, seeing none, I will go ahead and open this up for public comment.
Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick, I want to just make an announcement to remind the attendees how to comment. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 to implicate your desire to speak, and I will call upon you using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you are joining by your computer, use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Thanks, Regina.
Now accepting public comment from Kirk.
Go ahead, Kirk.
Is there a timeline?
3 minutes.
Okay.
Hold on. How do we do this?
We're getting there. I got it. Now you can unmute yourself, Kirk.
Kirk is unmuted. Your video's on.
Kirk, if you can hear us, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
There. Does that
There you
work?
go. Yep,
Yep.
we can hear you, Kirk.
Well, very simply, the Public Act Records Law gives you a duty to disclose unless there's some exceptions that apply. One of them has to do with confidentiality and things like that. So it's common for municipalities when they're releasing documents to excise that out, to redact it, to take a felt pen and knock it out. But what the city did in this case is you disclosed the identity of the property owner and the address. The problem with that is that owner has for years worked hard with the local police department to get rid of homeless campers and people who break into the property. And now we publicly have a statement out there about valuable historic artifacts being there for easy pickings. I know, I've seen them. And I've seen that site since I was a small boy, ages ago. So it's odd that on one hand, you spend almost $20,000 so far to get a lawyer to look for ways to avoid disclosing. And then when you just disclose a few papers, you miss the chance to keep that secret. And that would have been appropriate. It's troublesome because now that property is vulnerable to thievery because of the valuable contents are disclosed. That's the primary comment I wanted to share.
Thank you, Kirk.
Now accepting public comment from 846.
Hi, it's Jennifer Chapman, Clay Street. I have a
Evening.
comment also. Oh, am I?
No, you're on. Go for it. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. No, I just wanted to point out that the way it was also reported in the newspaper and some of the quotes, I think it might have been an interview with Dennis, there was such an emphasis on, you know, the amount of money and the volume of the request. And yet I think there have been other voluminous requests. I mean, this was mostly an electronic search, but I think there have been other, you know, large public records requests that did not get that kind of, you know, just derogatory commenting. You know, basically, it's basically retaliation for, you know, utilizing that public records request. I'm just saying, I think there's been other cases where there's been requests that have involved a lot of work and, you know, a lot of time, but you didn't hire a lawyer and you didn't, you know, put those people, you know, down in public, you know, as if they were criminals for requesting information. That's all I was going to say on this one.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, it looks like we have, well, it looks like that's all. Kirk, you have already commented, so I'm going to lower your hand, and same with 846. I believe that's all we have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Regina. Staff, I don't know, there was a couple of comments. I don't know if you want to provide any more context on this before we have further discussion.
Yeah, Mayor, if I could, I'm going to ask Rebecca Neves to give just a short, brief report. Rebecca, we don't need to go into detail. We actually were kind of talking about two different Public Records Act requests in those two comments.
Right.
Let me comment on the first one. And Mr. Driscoll, I think you are there, just we can't see you. If you could please, maybe it would be better if you were to comment on the volume of the first request and why we sent that to an outside attorney to assist us with. It was, I will say, in my years of doing this, I'm not sure I've had another request that had the volumes of information that this one did. Could you respond to that, John?
Sure, and you're correct. I mean, I've been with the city since 1989 in one capacity or another, and I've never seen a request as large as this one. We've never had a request where initially it turned up that we had over 40,000 documents that we had to sort through to filter out if they were responsive to the request. And even those have been culled down into like 13, 14,000. I mean, we've had requests of a couple hundred documents maybe at some time or that many, but nothing like this. And the city, to my understanding, did not have the resources obviously to deal with this. And that was part of the reason why it had to be farmed out. It was an unusual request, one like we've never seen before. So that's kind of, did that answer your question, Cleve, or information you wanted? Okay.
Yes, thank you. And then on the other item is regarding the Upper Broadway, and I guess maybe between John and Rebecca, maybe John, you could talk about this first, but the thought that whether or not the information that we have in our Public Records Act request constitutes information that we should not have released. And I'll let you respond to that, and then maybe Rebecca can give a brief report on that, where we're at.
Let me start with the premise that the names, well, first of all, a Public Records Act request is a public document in and of itself and subject to disclosure pursuant to any request under the Act. The names of the person or parties who are making the request is not confidential unless there is some reason that that might cause an invasion of that individual's privacy or that entity's privacy. Generally, phone numbers are redacted. Addresses are not always redacted. They are redacted for police officers. They're redacted for elected officials, but for citizens, not in every case. It's a case-by-case determination. So what the city did, as I understand it, is they basically reported the request, what the whose property it was, and what the information that was requested. That is not a violation of anything. The city's just being very straightforward with what the facts were, and there was not a disclosure of any confidential information in what the city published.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So Mayor, if you'd like, I know you asked me about this earlier, would like Rebecca to give us just a brief report where we're at on that. We've had a lot of meetings about this over the last week, so.
Yes, Ms. Neves.
Thank you, Mayor. Hope everybody's doing well. So right now we are in the process of professionally documenting and recording a cultural resource that is within the project vicinity of Upper Broadway bike lanes. As far as the PRA address disclosure, that was not something that the city actually did. I happened to be on that email, and it was actually the Mountain Democrat was CC'd by the requesting party. And as far as keeping items confidential, the city is fully aware of confidentiality laws, particular with the resources code, and as well in compliance with the Section 106 and the AB 52 process. We are following that to a T. Work in the immediate vicinity of this area of interest has been halted. And the city, does want to preserve and protect, we care about our resources. So, I know that maybe perhaps that's sometimes, not necessarily the assumption that's made, but we actually really do care about those resources too. And so we're trying to do the right thing. We are following our environmental document. We are following our contract plans and specs, and the contract does have a provision for inadvertent discoveries during construction. So does the environmental document. And we are proceeding with, in cooperation with not only Caltrans as the lead agency under the NEPA process, but also in conjunction with the AB 52 process. And that's kind of a brief overview of that. We have been keeping the project moving forward though, and we're working rapidly in other areas. It's never a surprise when Veer Camp shows up ahead of schedule and gets things done ahead of schedule. So we're very grateful for that. We actually did pour the sidewalk and Eldorado Transit bus pad in the last week. And if you happen to have a chance to go down on Broadway, you can see pedestrians already benefiting and using that space. And so overall, it will be a great project for our community. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Neves. Cleve, I had a question on this one. So I know Rebecca, or whether Rebecca or Cleve, but on the AB 52, when we first went out with this project, we contacted, I believe, the Shingle Springs Band of Indians, and then the Auburn United. I think I might have got that wrong, but those were, for lack of a better term, the two tribes that are recognized that we would have to contact during this process. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, just putting it simple, there are two listed tribes under AB 52 in this area, and there's those two, and those are the two that we contacted correct me if I'm wrong, Rebecca, only one of those responded.
That's correct. So far to date, only one has responded. The AB 52 process is very clear and the criteria is very defined. It's a state agency. There's a very definitive process on how to move forward. And, they're actually the Native American Heritage Commission, the NAHC, is the keeper of the state's AB 52 list. And in order to be put on an AB 52 list, you have to meet certain criteria. And I relate it a lot to becoming a surgeon. You don't just get to show up to a surgical room and they're going to hand you a scalpel and let you start performing surgery. There's process and, qualifications that kind of need to be met in order to get to that position, in order to be able to do and hold and carry that title of a surgeon. You go through medical school, you go through residency, et cetera. This process kind of has a similar path, and so when the city did its environmental document and cultural clearance process, the reason why they call it an inadvertent discovery is that it was an unknown resource. It was never professionally documented. It was never professionally recorded. And what I mean by professionally documented and recorded is that it has to be completed by a certified archaeologist possessing the Secretary of Interior qualifications, which our project archaeologists and team does possess. And so in accordance with those guidelines, now that you have an inadvertent discovery that was never documented, now you go through the process of documenting it, having it professionally recorded so that it can be protected in the future. So what this means is the city is proceeding with the necessary and legal steps to actually protect the resource. That's what I mean when I say that the city cares about this resource. We are complying with everything we need to do to ensure that protection. So when you go through the consultation process, when you have an inadvertent discovery, you do reach out to the consulting tribes that are on this kept AB 52 list. If a tribe has not met that qualification, is not on that list, they are not considered a tribal consultation, but merely commenting members of the public. And so there's a track for that.
Gotcha. So just to clarify then, so the Wapunis Nisenan tribe would be just the same as if it was, myself or any citizen in Placerville, but there wouldn't be a tribal status or a legal status under AB 52.
That is correct. In fact, the Native American Heritage Commission reached out to the city yesterday and confirmed on several levels that the Wapumis Nisenan Miwok tribe of El Dorado County is not a California Native American tribe as described and defined, and therefore they're not entitled to the AB 52 consultation process nor any other tribal consultation process. They have to go through the qualifications to do that. And subsequent to that, the NAHC also said, we haven't really heard much from them. So if they need help through this process, by all means, contact us. We're happy to help you through this process, and for lack of a better description, they're going to facilitate or guide them through the process. And I can understand, anybody that's had to file paperwork on any kind of state or federal thing, it can get overwhelming, right? Like, we have a lot of folks that are filing for disability, a lot of folks that are filing for unemployment right now. It's just as overwhelming. That staff is extending the olive branch to help this group of folks to get registered, to get recognized. They just have to start the process.
Thank you, Rebecca. Patty, you had a question or a comment?
I have a question. Everybody keeps talking about them, but was the property owner ever, did you have any kind of contact with the property owner? I know that house has sat vacant for years, and I just wondered if
Patty,
you had
I can answer that, Patty. Okay. Yes, the property owner was out there, met with our team, met with our archaeologist from HDR that was on site. And
no,
yes,
I mean, before all this happened, did you have any contact with him?
Go ahead, Rebecca. Yes, I believe we did.
So, the project being environmentally cleared, and again, this resource wasn't found because it was never documented. The project was environmentally cleared to construct a retaining wall within the vicinity of this resource. And, I've said it so many times, this really is a blessing and an opportunity, because had this, so I mean, from the city's perspective, we're actually really grateful that this was brought to our attention by the Wapumis tribe, just because we do, again, care about our resources. And so when it was brought to our attention and we realized what it was, we halted work in the area. Now, the property owner has been involved the entire time because they actually have a permit to enter and construct. They've granted that to Veer Camp and allowing access only to the contractor and city representatives.
So he
Nobody
wasn't aware
else.
of any of those, of the rocks showing,
Oh, yeah,
to
he's
your
aware.
knowledge? Oh,
Yeah.
he knew about it.
Oh yeah, he was actually there. He actually came out to the site after our archaeologist did an assessment right before our archaeologist left. And it was great. He's amazing. So Mr. Olson, if I may, he actually met with our archaeologist and walked the site and talked to him about the property. And, it's been in his family since about 1910. Yeah, and so he's actually been super helpful. One thing he did, we're working with also his executor of his trust. And the executor did mention today that they want to be clear that the contractor and city representatives and the property owner is the only one allowed to legally access that process or property. And enough to the fact where this executor actually brought up Penal Code Section 602. So they're pretty upset about anybody accessing their property without their permission.
I can understand that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other comments, either staff or council? Okay, seeing none, this is a receive and file. So again, thank you, Regina, for the update. So we'll move on to item 3.2, which are brief comments by city council members. And I'll start with Council Member Taylor.
All right. I participated in several webinars because that's how we do everything these days. One was on micromobility post COVID-19. One was on access to nature during COVID-19, which I think is very important. And one was about the financial impacts to California and its cities. I also participated in a working group with several of my council colleagues with the El Dorado Community Foundation and the Chamber of Commerce. The Community Foundation is working to establish a small business grants funded by local donors. These grants should be available soon and will be flexible funding, unlike the PPP. So anyone that is interested in those should kind of keep checking their website. And also the Chamber of Commerce is working on compiling information for restaurants. They found that there are many grants out there that are specific to restaurants. So for any restaurants, checking the Chamber website would be a good resource too. And I participated on a leadership call with elected officials from all of the District 4 counties. And we discussed financial impacts, disaster relief impacts, and business impacts of COVID-19. So that's all for the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Kara. Yeah, I did have a question for you, Kara, on that. Was there any anything that came out of that call in terms of best practices or anything else that you saw that was a highlight?
In terms of best practices, not so much. We are all in the same boat, facing, financial deficits and with businesses, struggling and eager to reopen. One thing that did come up was how we're going to be affected cash flow wise with the upcoming fire season. So that's just one more of the many pieces to think about, just with FEMA funds taking a while to be reimbursed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Council Member Acuna.
No comments this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Council Member Borelli.
Well, I'm glad I'm following Kara this closely because I pretty much did the same thing she did. I attended all the same webinars and learned the same things. And and I'm going to tell you, I just have to say hats off to everybody and all the organizations and everybody that's trying so hard to keep us going and keep this before the public and let them know, what's going on. And I appreciate it. Since, as you know, I couldn't even get into our meeting, so you know how. But I just think it's wonderful, and I'm really thankful that we've got this mechanism now to, pursue all our meetings. I keep thinking, I wonder what if this had happened a few years ago and we didn't have this, what we'd be doing. So anyway, I just want to say thanks to everybody for all their hard work.
Thank you, Patty. Vice Mayor Thomas.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I guess. I attended quite, or just basically discussions with a lot of people regarding the COVID. I spent a lot of time with some individuals who have done a lot of data analysis and predictive modeling to get a better understanding of what's going on there. One of the other areas that I have been spending some time with is the Opportunity in Oxford, the COC, Continuum of Care, and they have been extremely active. Actually, they in terms of support and providing this financial support for the homeless program going on right now during the COVID outbreak in terms of finding housing and supporting the homeless in site, where they providing meals, providing sanitation supplies, and really reaching out to that population to support to help reduce the spread within that population. The county has recently finished contracting with I think it's 3 different hotels in our community up and down the corridor to have hotel rooms for those elderly and the ones that are most at risk, because they are going to be the ones that will impact our system the most. And so to assist them in removing them from as many variables of risk as they can within reason and provide them the support that they need during this time has been a major effort. And Martin Entwistle from Marshall Hospital has led this charge, and he continues to do a phenomenal job in support. And also, one of the things, just you will get into this later on today, but one of the things it does do is it helps reduce the risk of a surge or a load on our hospital in times of potential crisis, where it makes more beds potentially available by reducing the risk throughout our population. And so that's been an important going on. The Coalition for Affordable Housing has been very active in this group as well. Maureen Dion Perry has been a major advocate and support in helping Martin Entwistle as well as the Vandekars. They have all been very active in this effort, and it's been good for our community. It's been good for the homeless population, and I certainly appreciate what they have done to date. I'll leave it at that. I've attended a lot of these other meetings that people are talking about. There's a lot of people working very hard for our community, and I certainly, just on a blanket statement, I appreciate what everybody is doing to help us be successful in really stomping the curve down hard. So.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I'll have some comments later when we get into some of our other items, but want to go ahead and move along our agenda here. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to item 4, which is our closed session report. And Mr. Driscoll, do we have anything to report out?
We do, Mr. Mayor. Tonight in closed session, the council unanimously denied the request of claimant January Lilligren to file a late claim with respect to her claim against the city. And other than that, there was no reportable action.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Driscoll. Moving on, we will move on to item 5, adoption of agenda.
Move for adoption.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? None. All right, agenda is adopted. So we will move on. Thank you. We will move on to item 6, ceremonial matters, and item 6.1 is a proclamation for the Peace Officers Memorial Day and Police Week, which I have the honor to read. So with that, I will go ahead and read the proclamation into the record. So this is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Placerville proclaiming May 10th through 16th, 2020, National Police Week, and May 15th, 2020, Peace Officers Memorial Day in the City of Placerville. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have adopted Public Law 87-54, designating May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day in recognition of law enforcement officers nationwide who have sacrificed their lives or been disabled in the performance of their duties. And whereas Public Law 87-54 also designates the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week in recognition of the services provided by thousands of federal, state, and local law enforcement officers. And whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of those who dedicate their lives to the law enforcement profession and to keep our communities safe. And whereas Placerville police officers and officers throughout the state and nation risk their lives on a daily basis to maintain peace within the community and to protect the lives and property of our citizens. And whereas the members of the Placerville Police Department provide a vital public service, safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of the city. Now, therefore, I, Michael Saragosa, Mayor of the City of Placerville, do hereby proclaim the week of May 10th through May 16th as National Police Week in the City of Placerville, and be it further proclaimed that May 15th, 2020 shall be Peace Officers Memorial Day in the City of Placerville, and the United States flag shall be flown at half-staff at all city offices on this date. And this is dated April 28th, 2020. And I know there's generally a large event in Sacramento every year. I have had the honor to be part of that a few times. This year obviously will be different, but I wanted to have our chief, Mr. Ortega, say some comments here as well. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Saragosa, for reading that proclamation. It's appreciated by all of us here at the Placerville Police Department. In California, there were 10 police officers lost in 2019 throughout the state of California. And unfortunately, our region was adversely impacted by those numbers, including the loss of Officer Natalie Corona from the Davis Police Department, Tara O'Sullivan from the Sacramento Police Department, and Brian Ishmael from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department, which impacted our community deeply due to the fact that he not only was a deputy here in El Dorado County, but he worked for Placerville PD for 2 years. Yes, there are usually events in downtown Sacramento, as well as the National Peace Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. This year, those have all been canceled due to the COVID crisis. I have presented or provided pins for all of you, including the department heads. I don't know if you all received your pins. Normally that would be a state pin. This year they weren't available. So you have a thin blue line pin that you can wear during the times that we'll wear them. So we really appreciate the support that we receive from our community. I don't think it was ever more evident than on the day of Brian's memorial, as well as the candlelight vigil that was held at the bell tower. That was touching to all of us. And it just goes to show that when one officer is lost, an entire community is impacted. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, for your support as we recognize those officers who gave the ultimate sacrifice.
Well, thank you, Chief. And it's certainly at times like this where we even more so appreciate all the work that our officers and sheriffs do throughout our county, keeping us safe in uncertain times. So again, thank you, Chief. And
thank you. Mr. Mayor, I have one more thing that Mr. Morris has asked me to mention. Last week, this will be really quick. Detective Luke Godow, who is our one detective here, received what's called the Katie Dobler Above and Beyond Award from the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office in Vern Pearson. I think most of you attended that virtually. They didn't want to cancel that ceremony because it was a chance to recognize Luke's outstanding commitment to crime victims and justice for victims as he goes about investigating his crimes. There were a lot of good words mentioned about Luke that day, of course, all of which I agree with. But anyway, we're very proud of Luke for receiving that award because that's not just given to anyone. And the district attorney and his staff felt it was well-deserved to Detective Godow. So I just wanted to mention that and thank those of you that were able to attend virtually and watch him receive that award.
Thank you, Chief. Council members, any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Chief. We will move on to item 7, which is public comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. And I will now go back and hand this over to Regina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public comment is now open for 7.2. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 to implicate your desire to speak, and I will call upon you using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you are joining by your computer, use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we will now accept comment from Wapumnes.
Oh, you're off mute.
I'm off mute. You can hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for providing this service. This is great so that we could all talk to you and see you. And in some ways, this is kind of a little bit more of an intimate exchange than normally in the town hall. So
Did we lose? I think we lost you there.
She's unmuted, Mayor.
Yep, I think, why don't we, do we have more than one commenter? We can come back to her if she's lost her connection.
Sure, we do have one more. Let's accept public comment from 846.
Thank you.
For again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So just a few points again. The last topic, of course, was really about the public records request, and that's not what I'm commenting on when I say that archaeological resource is along Hangtown Creek. It's in the Hangtown Creek corridor, and that should be recognized as a corridor that has a lot of significant resources in general. And so in general, there should be a lot of survey work when any project is going to happen in that corridor. And so one of the questions is whether there was any pre-construction archaeological survey on the property where there was ground disturbing activity. I'm not clear about how it's being called in the project vicinity, not part of the project, when obviously there's construction going on. And my understanding is it has to do with a mitigation actually that is being done, creating a driveway because some other part of the property is being used for the bike lanes or something like that. I also just wanted to say, I think Wapumnes, Lisa, is going to talk about on this topic of tribal recognition that aside from the state process and the federal process, which they are engaging in, the city is a jurisdiction and has its own ability to recognize this tribe in its own, jurisdiction. So I hope you'll consider that. And then I just want to say on the general topic of retaliation, I called the police department this week, and I won't go into the details of what happened, but I just want to say that when the general behavior of retaliating against people for, taking stands on these environmental issues or these concerns, when people become targeted in some way and there's retaliation, it can actually become dangerous. And I felt threatened by something that I reported to the police. And I just want to say that in general, because I feel like you as the leaders of the city need to really promote the diversity of opinions and ideas and certainly perspectives on our many different, valuable resources here. So thank you. And oh, one more thing is just, I want to say also, thank you, Kara, for pointing me to Woodrow Deloria about the hotspot Highway 50 study. And I guess I just want to say, Friends of Clay Street would like to be engaged in that, and is interested in finding out more about what's gone on to date with the Highway 50 hotspot study, and would possibly like to even be part of the stakeholder meeting. So I'm going to hopefully talk to him soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, do we have back the Wapunis?
They keep coming and going, Mr. Mayor, but we do have another comment from 857.
Okay.
857, go ahead.
Good evening, City. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay. Just generally, just a giant thank you to the City of Placerville for its restraint on restrictions of constitutional and civil rights. We've all heard the horror stories of other jurisdictions going way overboard. And hopefully you all heard that U.S. Attorney General William Barr said his Department of Justice will be looking into jurisdictions that go overboard. And his key quote was, "The Constitution is not suspended in a time of crisis." And another giant shout out to El Dorado Community Foundation. I know somebody, they helped pay some utility bills, and this person hadn't received the $1,200 federal check, hadn't received a penny from unemployment in 5 weeks. Not looking good. And El Dorado Community Foundation really just gave them a ray of hope in a dark time. So they are an awesome community partner. And then just a quick note on the public records request. Years ago, I had done a request. I got an old document in there. There was a couple pages of approximately 30 local firefighters' names and social security numbers. I immediately let the clerk know. I destroyed the pages. But one of those people on the list was a young firefighter named Brian Vierkamp. So due diligence is always needed in those matters. That's all. Good job. Keep it up. I love the phone-in system. It's great. That's all.
Thank you. And thank you for the comments about the foundation as well. It's always good to hear the stories of our community helping each other.
All right, Mandy Rodriguez is next.
Good evening, Mandy.
Hi, you guys. I just wanted to thank you guys as well for not coming down and putting massive restrictions on the city. And I want to echo the previous callers. Our Constitution is not suspended during crisis. And there's a lot of emotion going on on social media right now. And I'm sensing from social media that a lot of people, they want to stay in lockdown and they want to just keep the city closed. But then those are some people. But then if you go out into the real world of Placerville, there's people everywhere and people are over it. And the more that people are threatened with restrictions of their constitutional rights, the more that people are going to feel obligated to go out there and push that. Me being one of them. So, and not in a bad way, but I just feel that, being outside in the sunlight is healthy. And really quick, I had brought this up to Dennis as well, is, our Main Street is very unique, and I'm kind of in my head wondering what businesses are going to be able to stay open. And the sooner we're able to open and save those businesses, I think it'll be better and healthier for our city all around. And we have a lot of options as far as closing off part of the street and using that as outdoor seating for restaurants, outdoor area for retail. And I just kind of want to put that brainstorm out there that we do have a lot of options. And, we got a lot of flack from people for refusing, quote unquote, to close, but I'd like to see us be last to close, first to open safely. We're smart. We know what we're doing. We can wear masks or whatever we have to do, but I'd like to see us be the first city to open safely. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mandy.
No other public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And I skipped over written communications, Cleve, but did we have any written communications under public comment?
We do. There were a few, but they're all related to item 12.1. So I think those have been distributed to the council. So no need to pursue those further.
Okay, great. Thank you. And staff, and Cleve, did you have any comments on any of the public comments here?
No, we will look into those items that came up, but it wouldn't be appropriate to comment at this time. We'll get answers back to the questions if we need answers.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted upon by one motion by roll call vote unless one member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. And we'll move on to, do we have a motion? Or anything that wants to, any item that wants to be pulled by council member?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second, and I will then now open it up for any public comment on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just once again, I want to announce how to comment publicly. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 to implicate your desire to speak, and I will call upon you using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by your computer, use the raise hand symbol at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And Mr. Mayor, it looks like we do have one from the Wapumas. Let me get them on for you.
Okay. I think you're on mute still.
Having some technical difficulties here, Mayor. Just 1 second.
Sure.
I believe we're waiting for them to unmute themselves on their side.
You just have to remove what for the Wapunas tribe. You just have to unmute your microphone, and then we can hear you. Okay. Regina, did we have any other comments?
Hello?
Oh, we can hear you. Oh.
You're back on mute.
I'll be right back. Thank you. I'm going to call in on the phone.
We can hear you. Okay, I'm gonna. Are you there? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. We have a first and a second. Regina, can you call roll?
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
There is no other public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving along, we'll move to No items were removed. We don't have any ordinance tonight for item 10, nor public hearings. So we will move to item 12, discussion and action items. And item 12.1 is to review and provide direction to staff on letter to the governor and state legislators regarding COVID-19. And our city manager, Mr. Morris, has this report.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and Council. It's good to be with you this evening. This is an extremely difficult issue, as you've seen over the last 6 weeks or so that we've been facing this issue. It's unprecedented in terms of how we are responding and how we will respond going forward. I want to first say I appreciate the hard work of our staff. I want to especially recognize Pierre Rivas as our Development Services Director for his assistance. As you may know, he served in the county EOC for a week, helping in the planning of response and et cetera to this emergency. I also want to recognize and thank El Dorado County for their help, the EOC and all that they've done, but directly Dr. Nancy Williams, our County Public Health Officer, Don Simone, who's Director of Public Health, the Department of Public Health for the county, and Don Ashton. And I know Don Simone and Don Ashton are on the line tonight, are available for questions as we go through this. I believe Nancy may be, I didn't see her name specifically, but she may be there also to answer questions. We've had great cooperation, I feel, between the city and the county, and I really appreciate that. We have a great working relationship, and I think it really helps us move towards what needs to be done. Tonight, I would like to do a brief review of Dr. Williams' presentation she did this afternoon at the Board of Supervisors meeting. I'm going to run through this quickly because I'm hoping that most of you had the opportunity to review that this afternoon. Again, if there are questions, county staff are available to assist us with this. Following my presentation, we'll take questions for either myself or county representatives. So with this, if you bear with me 1 minute, I'm going to bring this up on the screen, the presentation, so that we can begin. Give me just 1 more minute. I'm getting there.
No problem.
So as you know, El Dorado County and their Emergency Operations Center put together this plan to look at relaxing the directive for shelter in place. Plan was developed, as mentioned, by all of those in the Emergency Operations Center in consultation with the Public Health Officer, Nancy Williams. As I mentioned, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, especially some of these first ones. I think this is common information. This is just a brief history of the COVID-19 virus and how it came about in our county. This is an important one that I want to point out. This is the number of cases per 100,000. We currently have 23. I will note, I noticed in today's report, they did pick up 1 more case. So maybe a slight change to that, but very minimal. And so it's important to note that in relation to our surrounding counties, we're doing extremely well. This next page shows the same. If you look at compared to other counties and cities throughout the state, you can see that we are doing a great job and have a very low rate in comparison. This slide will just talks a little bit about the impacts that it has economically on us, the health and wellness of our county, as well as how it affects neighboring counties and et cetera. In our report and what we're trying to point out in our request to write a letter to the governor is that we do feel that through our aggressive actions and other makeup of the county, we feel that we've done a great job, and we are different than what other areas are experiencing. Metropolitan and suburban areas are experiencing, and therefore the need to look at us differently. Again, this slide shows the cases compared to active cases, and you can see that drop. Dr. Williams noted on her report today, this shows 10 active cases. Based on their analysis, we're actually at 5, but this is based on those cases that are at least 14 days out. So we actually have, according to their office, 5 active cases, and that is county-wide. To my knowledge, we had 5 cases in the Placerville region early on and have not had any since that time. So I think I can safely say we do not have any active cases in what they're calling the Placerville region. Fiscal impact, these are numbers raised, collected by the County Emergency Operations Center. Expenses of 4.3 million to date. And I want to note lost revenue of 7.2 million to date. And I believe this slide, shows where that lost revenue is from, the 7.2 million and the expenses, who is included in those numbers. Next, I'm going to go through and run through quickly the 6 indicators that the state came up with and then our response to those. These are broken into, and you'll see as we go forward, I'll go through this first one a little bit more detail. This just talks about what an indicator is, and I'll let you look at that briefly, but Dr. Nelson addressed this more completely today, and I don't think I need to do this any further. So there's also how the indicators can be influenced, maybe by us, maybe by state and federal government, maybe by private industry, and et cetera, and then some by uncontrollable factors. So the first indicator, as you know, is the ability to monitor and protect our communities through testing, contact tracing, isolating, and supporting those who are positive or exposed. And then, so this next slide shows what our current status is, what we've been doing. Want to point out in terms of testing, that has mostly been done through the commercial laboratories. There is, as I turn to the next slide, you can see what we're planning going forward. There is plans to bring on additional testing sites throughout the state May 4th, and we will also receive those. We're still waiting on the exact location and timing for that, but we will receive those. Those will be a big plus to us receiving, being able to issue more tests. The details of how those are done is still being determined, but it will give us the ability to test a higher volume of people in our county. So that's number one, and this is kind of our report of why we think we can meet that first indicator, because we will be able to handle the testing as required by the state. Indicator number 2 is our ability to prevent infection in the people who are at risk for more severe COVID-19. And I want to note on this one, if you look at what the current status is, obviously we encourage those to stay indoors that are more fragile or older adults. And any high-risk congregate living centers also, we encourage them to follow the best practices for infection control that have been communicated to them. And then the state's order and local directive prompt for individuals, healthcare providers, first responders, et cetera, in terms of physical distancing, hand and surface sanitation, et cetera. The reason I went into this in more detail is I want to point out that that one under number 2 does not really change under the plans going forward. We still, if we go to this next phase, want to encourage those 3 items to continue the way they have been going in order to protect those populations. The third indicator is the ability of hospital and health systems to adequately handle the surges. And currently, surge plans have been created for our hospitals, for the ambulance, for the morgues. Alternative care sites have been identified, and PPE equipment is being is secured for all of our facilities. Going forward, the answer is, if necessary, we would implement these plans. I want to stress here that we do have the support of the hospitals in this, and they feel that they can handle, if we go to a next phase, they can handle any resulting surge that may come from that. Number 4, the ability to develop therapeutics. This is one of those that we cannot really do. We are heavily reliant on the private sector, federal and international levels of government, perhaps, that can influence that. That is somewhat beyond our control. The point is that as these become available, we will monitor those closely and make available and encourage the use of those as necessary. That is our plan going forward, as you can see in this slide. Number 5 is related to how businesses, schools, childcare facilities, et cetera, will come out of this. And how we can support physical distancing going forward for those. Currently, as you know, we have many of our businesses that are closed. Childcare facilities have guidance to, and those businesses that are open have guidance for social and physical distancing that they are asked to do at this time, and they're doing a good job with that. The El Dorado County of Education has been developing guidance for schools going forward. As you know, most of those are closed right now. They're developing plans of how we proceed. In the next phase, if we are to move forward, we will continue to update these guidances. We'll rely a lot on the El Dorado County of Education to continue to develop their guidance for how schools would open in the future. And then the last item is the ability to determine when to reinstitute certain measures such as stay-at-home orders if necessary. And on that one is pretty simple. We will continue to monitor the indicators that we currently do in terms of unfortunately death counts, hospital beds, ICU beds, and et cetera, and the utilization of those, and rely heavily on our public health officer and county development Department of Public Health to monitor those and keep us updated. So again, I went into that. What we will do going forward is continue to monitor them. I want to emphasize that there is no predetermined criteria, but it will be taking all of the criteria together and determining if there is a need to consider different measures. So with that, the county EOC, along with Dr. Williams, have developed a phased plan to implement to go to the next step. Currently, we are in what is called phase 1 with the restrictions currently defined by the governor, and waiting to see what less restrictive requirements might come forward from them. As you noticed in the press release, the county, Dr. Williams, has agreed to, stated that she will not renew the directive that she issued for stay at home within the county. The current plan is to align with California's phasing guidance, unless indicators less the point to need tighter regulations. As mentioned in the county's presentation today by their county council, we need to abide by the state's order. However, if we feel we need to be more strict than that, we can. However, we would be restricted from being less strict, what the state's plan is. So moving on, our reopening approach. I'll go through this in a little bit more detail so that you know what this is and have any questions we can answer when we get to the end. Our goals in a reopening approach are to definitely, number one, is to limit the spread of COVID-19 disease going forward. Allow for the eventual safe return of the El Dorado community and city of Placerville to normal operations and activities, and be able to return to prior phases if indicated based on our analysis. For individuals, anyone feeling sick or ill should stay at home and isolate from others, seek medical care if necessary. Everyone should continue to follow physical distancing, hand and surface sanitation, covering cough and sneezes, and face covering guidelines as are currently in place. Vulnerable individuals should continue to stay at home. Continuing social settings, gatherings of people from different households still should be avoided. Visits to vulnerable individuals in congregate settings should be limited to essential visits only, and non-essential travel should not be allowed still at this time, even in this next phase. For work and business, all workplaces will have policies to ensure that the sick employees do not come to work and that they go home immediately if they become ill at work. Use of all spaces is to be limited in occupancy at all times to meet the 6-foot distancing requirements. And if accommodations for that need to be made, those should be made. Other non-pharmaceutical interventions shall be applied as they become as applicable. Hand and surface sanitation, use of face coverings, etc., per state guidelines. Work and business continuing protection and accommodation should be provided to employees who are high risk for COVID-19. And there may be a number of ways that can be done. Businesses eligible to operate are encouraged to limit the number of staff and clients in the building at any given time, such that physical distancing and sanitation requirements can be maintained in accordance with all guidelines and regulations. And continuing, El Dorado County will follow the state's guidelines on which types of businesses may reopen. Anticipated phase 2 allowances by state law include operation of non-essential businesses that can maintain physical distance throughout the entire transaction that are non-contact related. So that gives you a general understanding. I want to note that attached to our agenda and attached to the county's agenda too was an additional guidance document that goes into more detail on all of these items. Continue to work in business. Ideas for decreasing opportunity for spread of COVID-19 include encouraging businesses to continue to use phone or electronic ordering in lieu of in-store shopping. And I hope that I can add here that we would encourage the use of phone or electronic ordering of local businesses for in-store shopping. Offering curbside pickup for delivery, marking floors and seating customers to arrange 6-foot spacing, allowing a limited number of people in business at any given time so that you can maintain those physical distancing standards as required. Establish appointment system and staggering appointment times, and still encouraging telecommuting where possible. Restaurants may reopen for limited dine-in options within guidelines. Tables must allow for appropriate physical distancing. Capacity should be limited to the extent that proper physical distancing can be achieved. Takeout options should continue to be promoted, and frequent cleaning and sanitation must occur. I want to mention quickly here some of the things that we've implemented, such as the curbside encroachment permits for restaurants could still be included with this in order to encourage curbside pickup for restaurants that may not normally do that. In addition, I heard some other comments tonight of additional options that may be available to perhaps allow outdoor dining during this time to increase capacity at restaurants. Those are things that we can continue to look at. Outdoor recreation is acceptable to the extent it's allowed by the state's order. Physical distancing is still required. Equipment, surfaces, handled, touched by different people should be sanitized between uses as much as possible. Should occur only near the participant's place of residence. Travel outside one's own community for recreation is discouraged. Again, I want to emphasize that we hope that you can still stay within our immediate community vicinity if doing outdoor recreation. Public health evaluation going forward will be to continue to monitor those indicators that we've discussed previously and note whether or not additional action is required or different additional restrictions that maybe need to change. Mitigation, again, monitoring those indicators and rolling back if necessary. Success simply means that we have not met any of those indicators and we can continue and hopefully move to phase 3. So with that, I'll move on to phase 3. Guided by the state's orders again, gatherings of limited numbers of people would at this point be allowed. Non-essential travel to extend farther from one's home. So that will, the non-essential travel just within our community would be released a little bit so that we can travel a little bit farther, but we still want to encourage being careful with that. Additional business activities would be able to comply with phase 3 guidelines. Again, the public health evaluation is the same as under phase 2, and we can look at how we would move forward. The mitigation again is the same. And then again, success is the same, which would then move us to proceed to number 4. Number 4, I can say as a change from number 3 would be primarily going to unrestricted travel, resumption of normal activities to a certain extent. However, I think from what I've heard, and maybe Dr. Williams or one of the county officials would emphasize this, I think in terms of social distancing and things where we may be in this for a long time. So I think this may be a new normal in terms of things that we would look at going forward. Public health evaluation, again, will monitor the rates and the cases and determine when we can move to that case 4 or if we need to return to other phases based on how we respond. Mitigation, the same, looking at where we are and what we need to do. And that is the end of Dr. Williams' presentation. And I want to thank Dr. Williams for putting that together. I did not probably do it justice, but I appreciate the opportunity to share her slides with you tonight. Included in your agenda packet tonight, you have a letter which I have prepared is basically the same as the letter which was adopted by the City Council this afternoon. I want to note that there was one change made to the City Council's letter, to the County Board of Supervisors letter this afternoon, and that is that they requested a response from the governor's office within 10 days. And with that, I will send it back to you, Mayor. I want to again add that we do have Don Simone from Public Health in the county and Tom Ashton. And I'll repeat again, I think Nancy may be there, but I haven't seen her name pop up, so I'm not sure she is there.
Great, thank you for the update. I want to thank all staff and Cleve for working on this. We've come a long way in 2 weeks from where we were. And I just want to, is Dr. Williams on the line?
She is. I've just learned she is on, so.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Doctor. I'm going to go ahead. Dr. Williams, do you have any comments you wanted to make at this point? No, I don't know. Don, do you have any comments you want to make at this point?
This is Don Ashton, the county CAO. Hopefully Nancy can speak when she figures out the technology. Mr. Morris highlighted it very well from my perspective. As he said, the board did approve the letter today from the county. A response date that was added to the letter was 10 days. We put that's effective a response by Friday, May 8th. That letter did go out to the governor's office this afternoon, so it has been released.
Great, thank you, Don.
Dr. Williams looks like she's unmuted, Mayor.
Great, Dr. Williams, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. You can hear me now?
I can, we can.
Yes, no, I agree. Cleve did a fantastic job. I think he did that presentation better than I did, so I appreciate that. And I don't have a lot of comments, really. I think he covered it really well. I'm excited that we as a county feel that we're ready to move forward. I guess I could say one thing about the phases is this is our Emergency Operations Center team kind of coming up with ideas of what we think would work for phases moving forward. It's obviously we're going to be guided by whatever the governor's comes out with for statewide phasing, which may be different from what we have. But I just wanted to let people know that we have these plans. We've thought things through and are ready to implement things as they come rolling out from the state level.
Thank you, Doctor. Council members, do you have any questions for either city staff or county at this moment? Okay, Vice Mayor Thomas?
I do have a question. Yes, thank you. I do have a question in that there appears to be within the presentation this expectation that we're following the state guidelines and following the governor's recommendations. And then in our letter, we're asking the governor to give us this authority or the ability to manage our community and open up. Can somebody kind of explain to me the difference between those two?
Let me first try that, and then I'll defer maybe to Don. Maybe you can address that too, Don Ashton. I believe what we are asking is for the governor to release what he allows us to do in conjunction with what we see as we are able to do. So we are requesting him to change, and if you saw his presentation at noon today, his presentation is different in terms of the next phase that we would go to. I would say that it does not open us up as much as we do in this phase that we're proposing. So, but our hope is that he will consider what we're asking, what we feel, because we think it's well documented what we can do, that he will reconsider, and what he opens up, which may not just be for us, but it may be. He has talked about doing certain things by region. So maybe he would be willing to say for this region, and it may not just include El Dorado County, that we would be able to open up similar to what we've proposed in our phasing report that we've given here.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Cleve said. The way I look at it, Mr. Vice Mayor, is that the governor has set his indicators of what he will be assessing. We want to try to follow those, but essentially what the letter is saying, we're ready now. We believe we're ready now, whereas many parts of the state are not. For example, the 6 Bay Area counties, they extended their stay-at-home orders till the end of May. LA County extended theirs until May 15th. But then I just read something that the Orange County Board of Supervisors approved something very similar to what El Dorado County did today, unanimously asking the governor to approve their plan to reopen. So it's every county's in a different place. We feel we're ready, but we want to do it in a way that demonstrates to the governor that we're having it based on medical advice and expertise, and that we'll continue to evaluate the data with that being the primary focus.
All right. Well, thank you for those explanations.
Yes, Councilmember Taylor.
I have a question for Dr. Williams. Am I correct in kind of gleaning from this that really the only change between phase 1 that we're currently in and phase 2 would be the opening of non-essential businesses where social distancing can still be practiced and allowing for limited seating in restaurants? But pretty much all the other guidelines from phase 1 would still be in effect.
That I believe is true. I think we're a little more, I think we clarified recreation as well, but we are still asking people not to do, say, gatherings of people beyond household members, because the face-to-face stuff is clearly where the mixing of people from different households and different communities is how this disease got spread. So yeah, we want to start slowly, measure where we're going, make sure that we haven't taken undue risk, and then move forward from there. And if enough time goes by and we haven't had a change and things look like they're good, then we could move into the following phase.
Okay, so by moving into phase 2, if the governor gives us the permission to do that, we are by no way declaring that El Dorado County is fully back to normal and up and running for people to come and visit, or, you know.
No, I mean, I know businesses would like that. I think that's, it's definitely premature to do that. We need to bite this off in little chunks and make sure that every incremental change that we make is safe. So we have to give everything a little bit of time to be able to measure that we are still protecting our citizens. And then once we feel comfortable with that, and then we get to that phase where we feel like we've had success, then we could consider moving to the next phase.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Dr. Williams, thank you very much for all the hard work that you've done on behalf of every citizen in the city and in this county. I had the pleasure of watching your presentation with the Board of Supervisors earlier today. And so first of all, let me thank you for all that hard work and the corrections and input that you took from the board and their concerns from citizens from across the county was very impressive. It looked like a very productive meeting. And so my questions actually is to Cleve and Mr. Ashton. It was my understanding that we were going to be sending a joint letter. And one of my questions was going to be, well, what was the outcome of today's Board of Supervisors meeting? Because believe it or not, my life did interrupt and I couldn't watch the end of the meeting. So it sounds as if the supervisors, with the various input that they gave, went ahead and crafted that letter, and it has been sent to the governor's office requesting with a specific time frame for a request. Is that true?
Yes, that is accurate. I'll speak, and then obviously Cleve can jump in. We did have conversations about a joint letter from all parties. Logistically, that was going to be very challenging with the time frame we have. So the thought now, at least from my perspective, is the county sent ours. The city of Placerville approves one tonight, send yours. We can send it to the same people and have it part of a bigger package. Marshall Hospital said they're going to be sending a letter as well. And so for the council's information, Barry Broom from the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, he now has ours, and he is committed that that organization will also be sending a support letter to the governor on behalf of El Dorado County and the city of Placerville and city of South Lake Tahoe.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. Cleve, for you, and I'm fine with that. Certainly appropriate, and I understand the logistics between the two agencies. It was a motion that I made 2 weeks ago that we make sure we involve the county because we certainly have to be in communication with each other. So I understand that separate letters, that's not a problem in my mind whatsoever, but probably more appropriate. There were I thought some important, good points made with the letter to the county. And unfortunately, I can't pull up, Cleve, your draft letter that you have for the state on my other computer on our email program. So I don't have it in front of me. So I'll just kind of fly blind at the moment. The county talked about making sure that case numbers were done statistically based on the population density that we have. Begin to be in line with the governor's concerns that we are using factual information and not getting involved in any sort of political arena when we're making sure that we justify it. That seemed like a good idea. And the other thing was they talked about making sure that it said hospitalizations and not just COVID cases. Because as we all know, and I think even as several of us on the council suspect, there are a tremendous number of undiagnosed COVID cases in the community. And I thought the Board of Supervisors very rightly said, well, let's look at the hospitalizations required because of COVID, because that was really where the impact becomes. As we've seen across the nation, there's a lot of folks that are asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms. Still would, however, test positive. Cleve, does your letter mention any of those things as far as the mathematical equations and the criteria that we're going to follow to monitor the number of active COVID cases in the city of Placerville?
I will tell you that the letter that I used was the county's letter, unless they made changes since the last time they sent it. It's my understanding the only change they made was the change that was made today, and I can verify that with them if there were other changes. But I received this, I believe, yesterday afternoon or around noon. And so I used the same letter. I simply changed it so that it was being addressed from the city. But it does primarily refer to statistics countywide because those are the statistics we have available. So yes, all of that data, the same that was in the county's letter, should be in our letter.
Okay, so we have, if there were a couple of minor changes this afternoon, we can capture those in our letter.
Absolutely, and I can work with Dawn to make sure we have the right language in there. So
okay, and I think to just kind of tag on to Councilmember Taylor's train of thought, and that this is actually a very small step. And I was reading some of the information that the governor released this afternoon or noontime today. I'll share it a bit later, but it slows this process down even more. Yeah, and again, this is just asking for permission to declare ourselves ready to go into phase 2, following all of his guidelines and meeting the and monitoring and meeting the 6 indicators. Is that correct, Cleve?
that is correct. However, I would hope that he would give consideration to our phase 2 because I think it is safe. I think it is a good plan. And I will say that from my understanding of his phase 2 he presented today at noon is somewhat more restrictive than what our phase 2 is that we have in our plan.
That's where I'm seeing the differences. Thank you, Cleve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Don, and again, Dr. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Dr. Williams, I had a question and just return in terms of being able to trace people going forward. Do you anticipate having to staff up, whether they're, contact tracers as we go forward here?
That is part of the going forward plan if it's necessary. And, I'm hoping that we won't get to where the case counts go up so much that we would get to a stage where we couldn't handle it anymore. I think the idea is to be cautious and move backwards before that were to get to the case, to get to that case. However, we routinely do these case investigations. So we have some staff that are already just baseline trained for that. We're in the process right now of doing some cross training with staff who do that work as well. And then if we start having to utilize them at that point, and possibly before that, we'll make sure we have additional staff within county employees to come step in and take that role on as well. I think we do have some people who are underutilized at this point because programs are less busy than they used to be. So there should be people available to handle that extra load if necessary. But again, I'm hoping that we can control this, the moving forward to the extent that we're safe and don't have floods of cases to investigate.
Thank you, Doctor. And just a quick follow-up on that. Do we know what the numbers are in terms of the 2 testing facilities that will come online, what their capacity is, so people get a sense of how many people will be getting tested or could be getting tested going forward?
Yes, that's the capacity is actually pretty big, and to be honest, I think it's way more than we need initially because I think COVID is pretty low. There's a low prevalence right now in our community, but the numbers are going to be 132 tests per day per site. Just for comparison, right now, I think we're understanding that our current demand from people who have symptoms is keeping up now, and we're doing at most like 40 to 50 tests a day, I think, something like that. And so that's going to multiply our capacity by a lot, and the initial capacity is going to give us a chance to do some testing of some of the more vulnerable populations and people who work with a vulnerable population. So we may be able to do some screening of long-term care facility workers or first responders or people like that with this capacity in the beginning. But yeah, I feel pretty comfortable that this is going to be a nice high volume that would help us very easily pick up people if we start having more symptomatic residents to be tested. They'll go to be tested.
Great, thank you. I saw Councilmember Borelli and then Councilmember Taylor.
Yes, Dr. Williams, along those lines, I'm not quite sure how this testing is being done. Like, say, for instance, I wanted to be tested and I don't, have a doctor's, can you go there? Or do you need a doctor to give you permission? Or I don't understand. And the other thing I would like to ask is a timeline. Do you have any idea how quickly all these, and I guess it all depends on, it's all going on statistics, how long it's going to take to garner a number where you're going to be satisfied to change, go from one phase to another?
Okay, so I'll answer your testing question first. Let me see. I'm sorry. I sort of lost my train of thought there. Could you ask the testing question again?
I just want to know, how do you qualify to go get a test? I'll put it that way.
Right. Yeah. So we're still waiting to get more details from the company the state contracted with, and we've had a couple of conferences with them, and it sounds like their decision makers have to get back to us with some of the answers. My understanding is it'll be very similar to the system that I think you heard about on the news, a month ago or so, that company Verily that was working with a testing company to do screenings at a number of sites around the state, including at the Cal Expo. However, this is a different company, so we don't know the details yet, but my understanding is that people will be able to enter their symptoms and whatever other information this company is going to ask for online, or if they don't have internet, I think there's going to be a way to do it by phone. But I don't know the details yet. My impression is that probably it's not going to involve a healthcare provider. I don't think that's going to be practical for us. If they're trying to get people tested right now, so to be able to get 132 people per day, I don't think they're going to be able to require healthcare providers and intervention in that. So I think I think the testing is going to be free enough that even if people want to try to game the system to get in, they're not going to need to do that very long, because I think after we catch all of our at-risk populations and get them tested, then there should be free enough testing for anybody who's really concerned about, you know, any little sniffle or whatever, or being exposed to somebody could probably get tested pretty easily.
What if you're not showing any symptoms? They say that sometimes people are spreading it without having symptoms. So that's what I was, you know, wondering about too.
Right, and that's a great question. I mean, the most likely scenario, there would be some people around that have it who have symptoms, so we would have an indication that there's some COVID in the neighborhood. So I'm not really hearing about much of that right now. Obviously, we're still getting a couple cases here and there each week, but I think the asymptomatic people are out there, but guessing who to test on what day if nobody has symptoms is a little bit hard to do. So I would say we're going to be applying as best we can the state's criteria. They've published some testing criteria that starts with the highest priority people, which would be, say, symptomatic people in the hospital. Obviously, those people are not going to be going to a community test site, but, you know, starting from the top down, with the lowest being just, you know, asymptomatic people who have no known exposures, for example. So I think there's going to be enough testing that at some point we'll be able to test pretty much anybody who wants to be tested, although a lot of that would be just probably out of curiosity, and there's not a need to test people frequently unless we think there's actually COVID around.
Okay. And so then my next question was the follow-up to that. How long does it take for you, and how long are you going to require the statistics before you're ready to move on to the next phase?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great question. And I mean, we've tried to think about that, but to come up with a scenario that involves all these different indicators at the same time, because we're going to be looking at how easy it is to treat people well, and that when they're in the hospital, how full our hospitals are, how severe the illness is in the community, you know, the availability of personal protective equipment in the hospitals. You know, if there's less of that, then we want to be more careful. There's a lot of factors that come into play. And of course, we're going to assume that the testing capability is going to be going on relatively indefinitely, as long as there's need. But, you know, of course, if that changed for some reason and the testing ability dried up, then that would change our thoughts as well. So I think we have to kind of play it by ear. I will be relying heavily on the assessments of our local hospitals and the indicators that we'll be looking at from their standpoint, and, you know, their numbers of hospitalizations, and just how their healthcare workers are doing, that sort of thing, as far as if it's affecting them. So, you know, we clearly don't want to get anywhere near ramping stuff up to where we are having to go backwards again. And I think if we get to a steady state, we may have to stay there for a while if it's not getting better. And if it seems to go really swimmingly, then maybe we can loosen up a little more. I think the next phase is going to heavily rely on people's personal responsibility to abide by physical distancing guidelines. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more face coverings in the community. Right now, with low rates of COVID in the community, it's a little hard to be super critical of people not wearing face coverings, because there really isn't that much risk right now. But when we move forward, that risk is going to become more real. And I think the messaging at that point is going to be, you know, let's take that step and all be good partners in this and start doing everything we possibly can so that we can be safe in reopening parts of our community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I think the first two might be for Cleve, but anyone who has answers, please feel free to chime in. So normally I watch all of the governor's press releases. I missed the one today, so I'm curious how the phase 2 that he rolled out today differs from the phase 2 that we're proposing.
I can try to respond to that. I didn't take good notes. I was trying to work and listen at the same time. But the one thing that concerned me is I didn't get the impression that his plan, which I'm sure we can find online now, actually allowed for any opening of non-essential business. I think that was in another phase after this one, as I understood it. Now, if somebody else has different information, I would love to see it, but that's kind of the way that I understood his message today. So that is a big factor that is different than what we are looking at in our phase 2.
So if in our phase 2, opening non-essential businesses is pretty much the only substantial change, how did his phase 2 differ from the current phase 1?
What was interesting is part of his phase 2, and help me out, someone else, if you heard this, related to getting childcare and schools back open. And that kind of surprised me, since I didn't think we were going to open until after the end of the year now. So again, I maybe shouldn't be speaking to this without better detail, but that's the way that I understood it.
And I think construction and manufacturing were also part of that equation, which were deemed essential, but have been shut down in other municipalities and counties prior to his statewide order.
Okay, thank you. And then another question I have is, one thing that really concerns me is if businesses start opening up, but their employees are afraid to go back to work or are vulnerable, medically vulnerable people, will their unemployment benefits be stripped if they're called back to work and technically their business is now open?
I don't have a good answer for you on that, Kara. I know you asked me that earlier today, and I believe that if there are still some restrictions going on at the state level and at the federal level, perhaps, I believe that those would still be available to them. That's going to be determined by the state and what they still allow for in terms of unemployment. That's governed by them. So.
Okay. Does anybody else have any information about that? Maybe at the county level or no? Okay. And then the last question I have is for Dr. Williams. And, testing, the state, the federal government, basically everybody points to testing as being key to reopening. And I was just wondering, you were talking about how beginning May 4th, we'll have increased testing capacity more than we need. Is there any talk or plans to do random samples so that we can get, an actual infection rate, including people that are asymptomatic?
Mm-hmm. So I think what you're talking about probably is maybe more related to antibody testing than to the actual infection testing, which is the capability that we're going to get in the near future. And the reason the infection testing is really important to have in place is you have to be able to detect new cases if you're going to start maybe letting things move around a little, people move around a little bit more and have more activities. So that's really critical for that. The antibody testing has benefit, kind of like you're saying about just getting a feel for what has happened in the community in the past. And I think the approach for that right now is to use it kind of on a scientific basis. And I don't think it's to do every county or certainly not every citizen at this point, because at this point I'm pretty confident there hasn't been that much COVID in our county. And if we do antibody tests on a large sample of people, we're going to come up with a lot of negatives. And then we know where we are today, but we won't know where we are in a month. And then we won't know where we are in a month after that. So timing of that, I think, is really important. And then the other factor about antibody testing is most of the tests are really not considered very reliable yet. And so I think it makes sense to wait until there are more available tests that will give a good answer back. But there are a couple communities that are doing what you said. I think one is the town of Bolinas in Marin County, which is a kind of a small, relatively isolated rural community. So that was one that researchers thought was a good example of a place where we think COVID hasn't really touched very much, but let's just see, given its rural nature, but in part of a county that's had relatively high rates, Bay Area rates, how has this area really been protected, or are we just making an assumption there? So I don't know. I don't know how long it's taking them to do all of their 1,600 or whatever it is residents, but that'll paint one little picture for that area, which might be similar to our county. If they come up with lots of zeros, then, or lots of negative tests, that might tell us, might kind of reinforce the idea that it's a little early for us to do that. If they came up with a whole bunch of positives in the antibody testing, yet they hadn't had very many positive tests for illness earlier, that raises some questions. And I think that'll be a really interesting progression, and we would have to take that into consideration with wherever we go. I mean, it would be good news to find out that lots more people have been infected, I think, than we think, because that means the illness was relatively mild, and possibly, I mean, this is something that remains to be seen, but possibly that immunity is out there more than we think, because we'll really be waiting to find out if having the illness once actually does convey immunity on people so that they're not going to get it a second time. But the researchers haven't come up with that answer yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Thomas, did you have a?
I'm good now. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Acuna?
Yeah, if it would please you and Mr. Morris, I think if you bear with me, I have some quotes from today's meeting with the governor that outlines stages 1 through 4. And I believe that it will be very beneficial for all of us to hear how he defines it, because it's a very slow pace. And he actually has given some pretty good information. It's split out through a part of an article, so bear with me. Of course, we're in stage 1 right now. The articles talked about stage, the next step would be stage 2, involving lifting the restrictions on, this is a quote, low-risk workplaces such as retail, manufacturing, and offices where telework is not possible. Reopening child care centers will be a part of the second stage. The thinking there is that they need to get the schools back open. Newsom said on Tuesday, the idea of restarting schools in late July or early August, that the prospect of an earlier school year are warranted considering the prospect of neglecting our next generation. He goes on to say, when asked, the next phase, stage 3, and this is a quote, is months, not weeks away. Stage 3 would be in stage 3, that includes businesses such as gyms, spas, salons, sports without live audiences, in-person religious services, and other businesses where workers come in close contact with customers. So that would be stage 3, and that would be, in the governor's words, months, not weeks away. So then he goes on and talks about stage 4, which we might all want to know about, and he does not consider us in stage 4 until such time as therapeutics have been developed, or in other words, vaccines. So in my mind, those are some, this is again from the governor at noon today, pretty significant guidelines, very slow. And that's just that's not a criticism, but that's just an observation. So.
No, thank you, Mark. I think that's helpful for all of us, just in the context of what we're doing.
Yeah, so again, he said, we're weeks away from stage 2 in his article today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I want to go ahead and get public to be able to weigh in here. So if there's not any other burning questions right now, let's go ahead and open this up for public comment.
Public comment is now open for item 12.1. If you're joining by phone, please press *9 to implicate your desire to speak, and I will call upon you using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by your computer, use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And now accepting public comment from 857.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so lots of notes here. The term essential versus non-essential is so insulting. So please start using safe practices versus non-safe and common sense. So it's somewhere in your document, which I love, please insert the term common sense. I like these guidelines. They're, like I said, they're just general. They're not micromanaging. You guys have done an excellent job with these. And I think everyone needs to demand the governor to adopt these. And so how can the public put pressure on the governor to adopt this for El Dorado County and Placerville? All right. Like I said, there are well-written guidelines that respect the rights of business customers, and I can support this. It's highly logical and something the governor needs to be forced to adopt, because he is very slow walking the reopening of this state. And I'm just ignoring everything that comes out of his mouth. This guy is way over his head. And I think you really should maybe not couch it so much as a request, but this is what we are doing. And come up here and stop us if you think you can, because that won't last very long at all. And he'll be back in Sacramento. In there, I saw that it says no reusable bags. So all the people that are used to taking their reusable bags to the grocery store, how are you going to get the word out? And I hope El Dorado County does not extend the stay-at-home order for another month. That is ridiculous. If they feel the need to extend the stay-at-home order, just do it a week at a time now that this whole bug seems to have already come through here. And we won't know that until we get our serology testing. But overall, I really commend whoever came up with these guidelines. They are down to earth, common sense. It's based on space. It's not saying childcare could open, smoke shops have to stay closed. It's if you can do it safely, you can open. And so I commend you for getting the economy back in line, because City of Placerville relies heavily on sales tax. We die, then the city dies. So that's all. Good job, guys.
Thank you.
No other public comment at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Excuse me, there is, oh, there's four. Four just came in. So let's hear from Kathy.
Good evening, council and members of the county staff. This is Kathy Lishman calling. I didn't think I was going to comment, but I appreciate listening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. I do understand the impact the virus and the stay-at-home orders have on business and the community. This is a very difficult and challenging time, and I appreciate the fact that you are trying to be cautious and creative. I thank the staff of both the county and the city and the medical community for working together and for basing this recommendation on facts and not politics. I wonder how it will be clear that even though the stay-at-home order is lifted in the county, that it doesn't mean that anything goes, that there still are requirements that you hope that people would adhere to. I know you feel pressure to open up, and I appreciate the fact that you're responsible for the health and the safety of our citizens. Testing is critical to giving us a more detailed picture of our community, the status of our community, our families and individually. And given how large our senior population is and how much at risk they are, it's important to be very prudent and caution with any efforts to ease the lockdown. And what about contact tracing? Will the county be able to do that in-house? Is it something that eventually would be needed? I'm looking at California County's 2016 demographics. I know it's old, but El Dorado County was 28% seniors. And so I'm really concerned that I don't know what the statistics are now, but I'm really concerned in knowing how our senior population is going to be addressed. We've been very fortunate in our senior living facilities that there have not been any serious problems as far as I know. So I just want to see what the plan would be for seniors. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, now taking public comment from Kirk.
First of all, I've seen the letter from the county and I appreciate it. It's thoughtful, reasoned, and appropriate. If we had this kind of letter available prior to the last city council meeting, much of your messaging could have been changed. As it was, despite the criticism, I think that the reportage was reasonable and accurate. Having said that, these are the comments I would offer about this measure. First is that I haven't seen what the draft is from the city. I don't know when that was added to the package. It wasn't there when I looked. However, it looks like largely the kind of guidelines that the governor has been presenting for the last several weeks. I've been listening to his briefings as well as to the virus briefings from President Trump for weeks now that are almost daily. And I appreciate Mark Acuna doing his homework because there's a great similarity between the two. So my concern is just what Kathy Lishman said. You're talking about a third of the county in the city as well, staying home. So if people start doing shopping for them, it's still going to cut down your sales tax revenue. And it's not just those who are senior citizens. There are other persons who are vulnerable, who have diabetes and things of that kind. So what everybody agrees is that you need more testing. And yet we don't have it. So if this is not political, why not write a letter to the president and ask about more testing, why we don't have it? Because we actually have the least amount of testing done with other countries per capita. Iceland has now tested 10% of the population. And what they found is that the persons who are testing positive, they're without symptoms. So that means people can be carrying it out there. The number is somewhere between 10 to 50% are carriers, just like typhoid Mary. I think we need to be concerned about history being repeated. In 1918, the Spanish flu that came through here in the world came through twice. The first time, once it was over, people relaxed. Hey, we got over it. They let their guard down. And then it came back with a vengeance. And the death toll was somewhere between 50 to 100 million, depending upon the estimates given on the subject. So, and in that time, it was fluid building up his lungs. Now what we're finding out is that the reason people have been given ventilators, and it turns out that the reason that they were having problems breathing is because of blood clots. So people in the 20s, 30s, and 40s have been having strokes. They've also found that there's kidney problems. There's a reason this is called novel coronavirus, because it's new. And we're learning lots of things. So in conclusion, great, but I'm not comforted. I think there's all kinds of problems. We're gonna wind up, we'll all be guinea pigs and see what you do. Did you say my time's up?
Time's up.
Thank you.
Now accepting public comment from Brian Vierkamp.
Good evening, Brian.
Hey, good evening, everybody. How's everybody?
We're good.
Well,
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for taking up this important discussion, and thanks to Dr. Williams, as well as Don Ash and Don Simone, and all of you for working our way through this. The advanced planning team of the EOC has worked really hard to put together these guidelines, and we should be very appreciative of them. I would echo what all you've said tonight, especially what Don Ashton has said from the meeting today, and thank you for those that participated as well as listened in on that. We don't have all the answers. Only God does. And we're utilizing the best information that we have. People that call in have their own opinions and their own ideas. We've got to go with the facts. And you see the facts in El Dorado County have been really relatively low. And that's what we're basing these decisions on. And, the rest of it is somewhat common sensey, and senior populations, at-risk populations, the guidelines and orders are there to keep those people in and keep them protected. So, the piece that's missing tonight was, and I don't think John did it, was talk about the legal ramifications or potential for the risk of all of us. If we don't follow the governor's order, there's potential for misdemeanor charges. So we got to be careful. Funding also could be jeopardized. So we think, and I think it looks like you think, that following these guidelines will at least get us to the next step. And then we'll wait and see what happens then. We put a 10-day period in there to try to get some response back, and give us an opportunity to show what we've been able to achieve by everybody's hard work. And it certainly, I think, has paid off. And it certainly doesn't open everybody up at all. We'll still, have the travel restrictions, and obviously the state's order will still be in place. So this is for our local people to try to get out and participate with some business, and try to get things going to a small degree. These are going to be baby steps, but we're going to have to take them. So thank you again for all of your hard work. Appreciate it, and the opportunity to talk to you tonight. And I'm going to go back to shoveling some manure for the garden.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you
your
all.
comments.
Yep.
Now taking public comment from 010.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. Good evening.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, great. Okay. This is Lisa Paradisi with the Wampumne tribe, and I was trying to explain something earlier. I'm supposing I still have my 3 minutes since I got cut off after, 10 seconds? So
we're on a different
anyway,
issue, Lisa. You'd have to respond if you want to respond on this letter and the COVID. If not, I'm happy to call you later and get your comments, but this is on a different item.
so when you're saying call me later to get my comment, are you talking about online so the rest of the community can hear, or are you talking about a private conversation?
It would be a private conversation. This is a different part of the public hearing
Okay.
now.
So, okay, well, then this is the only thing that I'd like to say. Don't even bother with the private conversation. We're going to be bringing the city a resolution to be able to support the tribe in going on the NEHC list. And we're
Regina,
also,
can you move on to the next public comment?
Okay, now taking Mandy Rodriguez.
Good evening, Mandy.
Hi, you guys. I'm just commenting on this again because I was working, so I didn't even hear Gavin's press conference today. And when you guys read that, I'm sick to my stomach. I understand that we have an elderly population. My father is a senior. I have a mother and a sister that are both immune compromised. So when I say we need to open this state, we need to open this country, it's not that I don't care about them. It's because I do care about them, because our tax dollars are what helps those people, those programs that keep the people going, the seniors, the health, the immune compromised, those kinds of people. They need help from healthy people. Right now, with these closures, drug abuse is up, domestic violence is up. There are sick people that are not getting treatment right now. They're not getting cancer, life-saving treatments right now because the doctor's offices are closed. There are people that are having heart attacks that are not going to the doctor because they're scared, because they don't want to catch this virus. Our hospital is empty, okay? There needs to be, one way or another, people are going to die, and we're just gonna have to be real and be adults about this, okay? The ship is sinking. There are millions of chickens being killed because there's no supply chain to bring them from one place to the other. Pigs. We haven't even seen the effects of what is happening in the future. And in the near future, we're going to be running out of food. Like countries are shutting us off. So we have to be cognizant. We have to think about that. We have to think about, you know, in the Civil War, during the revolution, like people, we had smallpox, but you know what? Brave people stepped up and they still went out and did the right thing. And we have to do that. Either way, people are going to die. But right now, the UN is saying that 130 million people in the world could die from this. And when people tell me locally on social media that I'm a bad person and that I want them to die, no, I want everybody to live. But we have to be real and honest and adults about this. This is a real thing. And we have to get our country going again. Because if we listen to Gavin, we're done. We're done. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Mandy.
Now taking public comment from TW Bonkers.
Good evening. Hello.
Hey, are you there?
We are here. Good evening.
This works differently than yesterday or earlier meeting today. So, hey guys, I want to thank you very much and thanks for doing all this work for us. It's been fun watching you guys and paying attention to how this letter has created a fairly big divide in our county. But I want to give you a different perspective on from what I've heard tonight with some folks saying. As you know, I own TW Bonkers, and I just want you to know that I'm in no hurry to open. I want to be safe. I respect those who are opening and who are ready, and I know there are lots of businesses that can open as long as they follow the guidelines that are set forth. But I'm prepared, and I'm prepared for this one, and I think I could handle it for a little while longer. So if we do ramp up and I don't feel that it's, you know, necessary for me to open, I want to put that out there to other business owners that don't worry, don't feel that you have to open if your other merchant friends are. If you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to. And in my case, I have tons of kids that come into my store and tons of senior citizens. So I have a lot of germs floating around. And my whole store is an experience store where people touch things and play with things and have a great time. And I'm just not ready yet. So I just want to give you a different perspective of how much I appreciate this. And I'm prepared and I'm okay. And when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and open. And that's it.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
You got it.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I do have one comment that was received by email with the request to read aloud for item 12.1.
Okay.
This is from Lexi Boger. She says, "Dear Mayor and City Council, my name is Lexi Boger and I am the president of the El Dorado Winery Association. Regarding easing COVID-19 restrictions for business in El Dorado County and the city of Placerville, I have the following concerns, especially as a large tourism generating industry. We are all well aware that our county has not been hit very hard by the virus, and that's a great thing, but it should not give us a false sense of security. We have not been hit hard because of statewide shelter-in-place controls. If you allow us to open up our tourism areas, such as Apple Hill, the wine region, South Lake Tahoe, and Main Street, it is going to become an attraction for visitors and virus-hit communities desperately looking to get out of the house and go do something. This will bring the virus to our door. Moreover, it's not just the county or city that is going to look irresponsible. The bad PR will fall directly on the heads of our industries. Our valued customers, who are reasonable people doing their best to support social responsibility, are going to see El Dorado wine region as ignorant and selfish. The bulk of our visitors come from the Bay Area and Reno, two areas we know have a higher incidence of cases. I can't tell you how difficult it has been for the EDWA board to take a very strong leadership stance and ask our wineries to adhere to the strictest of interpretations of the state recommendations. We want desperately for our small wineries, we want desperately for our small or struggling wineries to survive this. The fact is that if you ease restrictions, many of our wineries will not be able to resist opening, and no one can blame them. This is going to create tension between wineries as well as with the local community, who will see us as purposefully attracting non-local traffic for financial gains while endangering all. Making a premature decision to open up to the public will only give short-term financial relief while contributing to a drastic extension of the virus's lifespan. If it were possible to have county business be open safely only to local customers, that would of course be ideal. However, the logistics necessary to stop the influx of traffic would be impossible to pull off. And putting some kind of ID check in the laps of businesses wouldn't be effective either, because no business is going to turn down a customer who already made the trip up and the damage is already done in terms of exposure. Instead, I urge you to make the harder decision of conceding to the higher authorities and their Western states plan. I don't envy your position, and I deeply appreciate the hard work you all do. Leadership is not about making the easy decisions, but the hard ones. Thank you for listening. Best, Lexi. And that concludes public comment for item 12.1, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Okay, so public comment is closed. We'll bring us back to the council for further discussion or motions. Any comments?
Mayor, I'd like to just make an observation. I don't know if it's observation, just my personal feeling, and that is that I believe that our economy and our health care is well, they're connected and they're joined at the hip, and that without a I'm not even gonna say vibrant, without a functioning economy, the money is not there to take care of our healthcare. You know, we're waiting, we're hoping as a city that our government is going to print some more money and send it to us. Our governor is about ready to be, you know, to have some serious questions asked of him of the legislators on how he's spending the state's resources. Now, I'm not advocating anything more than what we're talking about, but I am advocating for what we're talking about. And I'm going to go back to the economy is tied to our healthcare, and without both of those functioning, one of them will, or both of them will fall. And it is it's a scary time, and I know a lot of people are really scared about this idea of even just lightly easing the restrictions in our community. I have had several phone calls, of which I have shared with people that I will share their comments that they want this to not happen, that they are scared for their family, for their kids, for their own personal health. And they are, you know, almost petrified at the idea of this opening up. I have gotten some rather, what would be the right word? Colorful comments to my, and I want them all. I want to hear them all, because, you know, getting all these comments, I appreciate them, and having them all here helps us frame our discussion here. I think that the county has done an amazing job. I think Don Ashton, the county CEO, and his leadership in the county level, working with the Board of Supervisors, has put a team of experts together locally that have been guided, experts to guide and inform this process. They have touched on every aspect of our community, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work that the county has done. They have been working nonstop, and our city staff has been, you know, I have talked to Cleve maybe every day in the last 14 days. And he is taking, I shouldn't say this, but he's taken my phone call, and we have had numerous discussions on how this process has been going. discussions with the county, discussions with, you know, I'm the one that kind of stood up and started this ball rolling with the city. And I feel somewhat responsible I do feel, as we all do, and I feel a certain responsibility to stay as informed as possible in this process and to interject where I feel it's necessary. And I think that the city and the county have done an amazing job in producing a letter. And if you go back and you look at the 2 weeks ago at our city council, which I've done, this is exactly where we asked Cleve to go. This is exactly the intent that we expressed and that we gave him direction on. And he has taken this ball. He has worked with the county and Don Ashton for countless hours together to put this together for our community and for our county in a cooperative way that brings in all of our healthcare professionals to have a cohesive and collaborative agreement to move forward and produce this for the county. And I just think it's amazing. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any other comments at this point? You know, I will say, I know, as Dennis mentioned, you know, 2 weeks ago, we had this discussion in terms of a letter, and there certainly was news generated from that as we went forward. Some things I think got lost in translation as that happened, but as we move, so fast forward 2 weeks, and we've really been able to do, I think, a great job of getting everybody together, with Cleve working with Don and Dr. Williams, for everyone, for the county and for the cities and first responders working together to come up with a document that gently eases opening here in El Dorado County, understanding that there are some inherent risks to that, and having a plan in place that can then mitigate those or respond to them quickly should we have, you know, anything pop up. We will never get to a point where we have zero probability of spread of this virus, or where we can say absolutely that we know that this is the right time. And I think anyone that tells you that is lying, because nobody knows that. Nobody has a crystal ball. We've never experienced this before. I hear everybody when they say, I mean, it's not just about getting out because you want to get out. It's about going back out to work and helping your family. People don't just want a check that comes in the mail from the government. And we do have to take that into account as fiscal managers of both the city as well as just representatives of our state. How much more debt do we want to put on people that haven't even been born yet? Because we're going to continue to put money that's not backed by anything, as it is anyways. At some point, we do have to open things back up, and there will always be an inherent risk in that. I think I want to really commend Cleve and Don again, and Dr. Williams, for bringing our healthcare partners into this discussion, and the fact that both Barton and Marshall Hospital are on board with this plan, I think speaks volumes to the work that's been done and the thoughtfulness that's gone into the health and safety of our residents. And so, you know, we have a decision here to go forward. I myself support the idea of this letter and how we go forward here. I think it puts a marker down. I think it's going to be incumbent upon localities, municipalities, and regions to talk to the governor's office and say, this is what works for us. We understand statewide orders and how those will be matriculated down, but here's what we're saying works for us, and how we can contain and work within that environment that you put forward. So I think it's important for us to have that marker down. I saw there was a couple of questions, and I'll ask whether it's Dr. Williams or Don Simone or anyone on here, in terms of, I think it was Kathy Lishman's question in terms of outreach to seniors. I know, and Chief Cordero could probably talk to this as well. I know there was early correspondence with Eschaton and other places, and I think this was throughout the county, where we went out to make some of those, just to get that information out there. But I don't know if anyone wanted to comment specifically to seniors, our senior population, in context of this plan.
Don Simone, are you still on the call?
He is.
Yeah, I am, Nancy. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about what we've done with some of the sites with the extra training versus.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, I'm happy to do that part if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, as far as our public health staff did go out early in this event and work directly with some of the facilities that have group housing that I think is mostly seniors, but the long-term care facilities and that sort of thing, to do extra training with them, and also to just set up chains of communication so that they know they can call us if they have any questions. And I think we're probably getting ready to do a little repeat of the reach out there as far as protecting people when they're in those kinds of healthcare facilities and group living facilities. What I was thinking Dawn might talk about is the different things that the county's been doing as well to help reach out to seniors.
So yeah, a couple of things. We've seen an uptick in our home delivered meals for seniors. About 100 additional meals are being delivered as of yesterday. And then we're also doing a lot of phone calls to seniors throughout the day to check in on them and see how they're doing. And there's another program that the state has coming online that we may or may not qualify for because we do have a high level of service to our seniors, so we may not qualify for it. But we're working with the state now to see whether or not we will qualify in conjunction with some local restaurants and getting some seniors that we are currently not serving 3 meals a day. So we hope to have more by the end of the week. We'll be briefing the board next Tuesday on that program and where we are with that.
Great, thank you, Don. Now, I was actually going to ask that question about the $66 amount that the governor's put out there for meals for seniors. So
Mayor, if I could just add to that, under this scenario we're talking about going to this phase 2, those conditions wouldn't change. So I'm asking, I guess, Don, or mentioning that those would need to continue as they currently are until that changes for those senior and higher risk populations.
Yes, there would be no change for seniors going into phase 2 if the governor allows us to do that. We would maintain the same work we're doing right now.
And Don, I just want to accentuate that those are also, you are serving not just the county residents, but the residents of the city of Placerville. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the residents in the county, regardless of whether or not they're in a city, Placerville, South Lake Tahoe, we if they qualify, we would be serving. Yes.
Thank you. And I'd also like to express my appreciation for you and Dr. Williams for taking your time to be here tonight. I know that your days have been extremely long. Your weekends have been extremely long. I don't know that if you've taken a day off in the last month. I'd be impressed if you have. I have seen you at every meeting that I've been in, and from there you've left one meeting to come to that and you're going to the next. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the effort that you and your staff have put in to make this possible and to have the best interests of our community in mind. So I want to express that appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Don.
No, I was just going to give kudos to Dr. Williams. She has been amazing during the last 8 weeks. I'm amazed at her ability to maneuver these waters. So I echo Councilman Thomas's sentiments.
Michael, I'm going to start out with apologizing. I got kicked off the network for some reason. I had all these messages that I was not secure, and I mean, all kinds of things happened. So I finally got back on. I don't know if this has been addressed or not, but you know, I do serve on the fire the committee and I was, maybe this is a question for Chief Cordero. How are these regulations going to affect that the fire suppression, or, you know, folks that, because that's coming up, and, you know, not very far off. And I'm just wondering how, I mean, how can, maybe it doesn't pertain to folks that are doing that, but like, I know that the committee, we were going to go around to different neighborhoods and try to, you know, knock on doors and stuff, and maybe that's not going to be allowed anymore. I'm wondering how that's going to affect that situation.
Councilmember Borelli, are you referring to the ability for the fire department to respond to the calls once?
Well, or just, yeah, and for the work that that's been suggested with the committee, you know, we're doing Zoom meetings and stuff, but I know that they were going to try to gather some statistics, and they were going to try to deliver messages in certain areas. And I didn't know whether that, you know, would be able to be done.
I think as far as the fire service is concerned, we'll continue to operate the way we are right now. We'll be monitoring closely what's going on in the county and as it relates to the COVID response. However, we probably won't make any changes in our response plans until farther into the plan.
Thank you.
Mark, did I see you had a question?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've been wiggling. I was wondering why Patty was so quiet. She disappeared.
I left you.
First of all, let me thank all of our friends again from the county for all the hard work that they put in today, this evening, and for the last 3 to 4 weeks on this, and all the folks at the Operations Center out at Sheriff DiAugustini and his group that have worked to keep us in line with all the various agencies' requirements as we respond. If you know, for all of our citizens here in town, there has been a tremendous amount of effort. As Vice Mayor mentioned, he calls the city manager, has called him 7 days a week. And that is what this kind of an event unfortunately requires. So thank you to all of you, city and county, for your dedication. Couple of clarifications. Let me just for the record state that I was able to recover my email, and I do have a copy of Cleve's draft letter to the governor, so I have that in front of me. I don't want somebody to think that I did not have that for review here while at this critical moment. Couple of pieces of business, I guess, to the item to authorize in the letter. One would be my suggestion to include the county's wording to request the governor to respond within 10 days. It certainly seems reasonable. We all deserve an answer to this. And also, I mentioned earlier, there were a couple of tweaks that the various members of the supervisors suggested during their meeting this afternoon. So I would be happy if Cleve would just review with County Manager Don Ashton to just make sure that our verbiage is in line with the counties. And again, those improvements would be, from what I heard, in line with the governor's requirement that we operate with medical facts and statistics, that we're not dealing with emotions and concerns. And so I think that if Cleve could just get with Dawn to make sure that happens, I think that would be appropriate. I'm on the verge of making a motion to approve the city manager's letter as drafted with those changes. Would you like to see if there's a second, or would you like me to make some additional comments? I have several points that I would like to make, Mr. Mayor.
Why don't you go? Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and make comments?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. You know, I'll go back to 2 weeks ago. That was our first Zoom meeting, and I think we've all felt privately that this letter has turned out to be exactly what we asked our staff to do. It was not our attempt to go rogue or go in retaliate some sort of renegade fashion against the state regulations or in any way to dismiss the seriousness of the pandemic. It was simply a request to make sure that we were doing our jobs, and that's to advocate for every citizen in the county, keep them safe. And the governor has been good in giving consistent briefings. I think the plan that he has outlined for California right now is very thorough. It's very time sensitive in that he is not going to proceed without scientific data to back up each one of the steps. We take into what I was able to read into the record this evening for his comments from today. It's obvious that we're still many weeks or months from reopening different parts of our economy throughout the state. There will be no rushing around that. So people do not need to fear that that is our attempt. So one of the important things that we need to remember is that it is our job to advocate for our local business owners who somehow are going to hopefully all survive this disaster. And as this enters the second month, and with indications from the state that it may enter a third and a fourth, this will indeed be an economic disaster. We as leaders don't have the luxury of hiding our heads in the sand and just ignoring what that future potential is. At the same time, I think it's very important for us to remain in the moment and recognize that what we do right now needs to address the facts and figures and the data that we have. So if folks are concerned about this, this situation is moving so fast that unfortunately, with all the effort we put into this evening, will probably become irrelevant in a very short time, because this disease and its impact on our state and our local area, it is operating at amazing speeds. I looked at the case numbers and how quickly that has now gone to 1 million in just a few days, basically. So a couple of things, and one other thing, Mr. Mayor, if I might, is the importance of following the medical data and again, not getting involved in emotions. And also, this will be difficult, but what isn't difficult about this thing is that the travel restriction remains in place throughout all of the governor's phases until the very end, to 3 and 4. He also requires that the elderly and those at risk remain sheltered throughout this whole event. So there is no lessening of those concerns. This will be difficult to do, but I believe the travel restriction is a key in preventing folks from coming here. You got to remember that if you live in the Bay Area, you're being told to stay at home yourself. If we move on to phase 2, we're still telling you to stay home. We don't want you here. They don't want us there. The governor is going to have to help us come up with a way to find out a unique system to somehow enforce that. There was some concern about Amador County. There was some concern about the wine growers. Yes, those folks cannot come here right now. This is a disaster. This is a pandemic. This isn't just a snowstorm or a blizzard that's going to go away in a couple of days. You can't come here now. So the message that the governor is very clearly saying is that travel restriction will remain in place. You are not supposed to go. Any unnecessary travel is restricted in phase 2. And that will be the thing that hopefully will allow us to crack the door to opening Placerville for Placerville and opening El Dorado County for El Dorado County. So with that, I would make a motion to approve the staff's recommendation with the addition of a 10-day response request from the state, and also making sure that our data, with the medical, especially the medical data, is in line with what was submitted by the county today.
I've got a couple of comments before moving on.
Sorry, I missed that. Councilmember Taylor, did you do a second?
I just wanted to make a couple comments before moving the discussion forward. This is a really difficult topic, and I think everybody's felt conflicted about it, largely because there's so much that we don't know about the virus and so much that we do know about the economic impacts that we are going to be facing with the one month closure, and what that's going to look like if it's a 2-month or 3-month closure. There are some real concerns that people have and that I share. One is the potential that if we open up, we're going to have to reclose. And that's really hard on businesses. And especially if, we're reclosing during PSPS season, the power safety shutoffs, and the holidays. So that's one concern. Another concern is the increase in tourism. You know that the press is going to run headlines like El Dorado County is open for business, which is not at all what we're doing here. But I don't know how we're going to prevent people from coming from out of town. And so far, we don't really have the increased testing capacity, although it is coming online May 4th, which is within the 10 days that the governor has been requested to respond to El Dorado County's letter. And there are real fears from vulnerable people in our community, of which we have many, with 30% being elderly, along with all the parents of kids with asthma and diabetics and those suffering with cardiac problems. On the other hand, Marshall Medical Hospital and the Public Health Department supports this plan moving forward. And the reality is that cases have been flat in this county for quite some time, and we could remain in this state indefinitely, which is definitely not sustainable. And there is a real human cost to being closed. So just to kind of summarize for the public, because I know a lot of people are really concerned about this, what we're doing here is proposing one minor change pretty much of opening up some more businesses that can still socially distance with the permission of the governor's office. So we are not opening up for business and we're not welcoming out of towners to come to El Dorado County. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor.
Michael, I have one question. I don't know who this is directed to, but we see a lot of stuff on television and we see the folks that are challenging some of these rules and they're, business owners and they're just saying, hey, I'm opening up. And that's, what's happening to those people? Is it, if we had that happen in our city, do we go after them or what kind of regulation, is, there's a lot of frustrated business owners. I am sure you're all aware and you all know it, people that are fearful of going broke actually. And they're just willing to take this on and just say, you know what, I'm doing it. So I'm just curious to know what happens if they do.
Patty, I think it's fair to say that there's some that are doing that now.
I think it's fair too.
We are currently in a mode of educating if we learn of it and get concerns raised or complaints about that. We have had our police department has gone out and let them know that it's not appropriate, and most have responded appropriately to those requests. So that is where I see that we will still be going forward, that we will attempt to educate and ask people to not open up or not do things that are in violation of either the governor's order or our current regulations. And we will deal with that as time goes on as we need to.
I would like to go ahead and offer the second and also say that I have repeatedly said that I would not approve or want to move forward without the full cooperation of our public health director, Nancy Williams, and her participation in this process, as well as the acknowledgement from our hospital and as well as Barton Hospital, because this is our county, it's not just our city, and as well as EMS and the county and the board of supervisors all on board, and we have that today. And I appreciate the hard work that everybody has put into this, and that'll be my second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. We have any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Pardon me if again. To go on to something that Kara mentioned, and this kind of surprised me, but I want to reassure folks that some of the social media concerns, everybody is still entitled to stay enclosed. Their employees and what have you are still absolutely, if someone does not feel safe at any point during this, they're encouraged to follow their concerns. There's no forcing anyone to get involved in this. It's also to be noted that today, Dr. Williams also announced in her own press release that she is not extending her department's stay-at-home order beyond April 30th. And you can all go online and find that. Her letter is there and it explains it all in detail, the reasons why she feels that it is not necessary at this time. So while that isn't part of our letter, it is something that did happen today. It came strictly from her department with all of the data that her and her employees have collected throughout the county. So I think that's important to remember. And so thank you. Thank you for letting me add a couple of points.
Thank you. And I'll just say for my point, and I know I've told some people this individually or in emails that I've been sent, and that's, and I think I said this at the last council meeting, and you know, all areas aren't the same, and all areas aren't going to recover from this at the same pace as well. Our county really was still suffering some of the after effects of the Great Recession. And so the elasticity that a San Francisco or a Los Angeles that has really a global economy behind them in order to bounce back after something like this is just not in the cards for an El Dorado County or an Amador or other areas. It's going to be harder for us. And because of that, there is an inequity built into that that we're, I think, keying into here a little bit, in the sense that we do have some differences, whether that's density or other things, that may allow us to actually start a little bit more so that we can save some of our businesses. We know not all of them will survive. Some have already shut. And it's not just those businesses, it's the jobs behind those businesses as well. And so we have to be able to look at all those options on the table. It's health and welfare also means an economy that's working. And so I support this measure today as we go forward here. Council members, are any further last comments from anybody?
I have one more comment. I'm kind of echoing what Mark just mentioned, and also what one of our commenters, Tony Wendell, mentioned, is you do still have a right to stay home. And businesses do still have a right to stay closed, and businesses that choose to open have a right to require that people wear face masks upon entering. And I think I personally would love to see face masks mandatory, at least as we're first easing into this, but I realize that that's not in the county guidelines, but businesses can make that determination on their own. So, you know, there is still the choice to act how you feel you need to keep you and your family safe.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor, and thank you as well for your thoughtful letter. I know you didn't mention it in your comments, but your thoughtful letter in the Mountain Democrat as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody for the conversation we had tonight, and especially for our county colleagues who have put in a very long day already. So thank you for sticking with us on this call. For the participants on the call, I invite you to stay on for the next two items, because they're in direct correlation to what we're talking about and the real life consequences of what we're dealing with here in the city of Placerville. So with that, Regina, would you call roll, please? Thank you.
Mayor Saragosa?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me take a poll here of my colleagues and staff. Do you guys wish to have a quick break here, or do you want to power through? I'm good either way on my end.
Maybe a 5-minute break.
Quick break would be appreciated.
Okay, so let's we'll see, what is it, 8:43? So how about at 8:50 we'll come back online?
Okay.
Perfect.
8:50.
All right, so a 7-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we have everybody back. Are we live again? So we ready?
We are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're live already. Yeah. Okay. All right. So moving along then, we would go to item 12.2, and that's acknowledge and file the fiscal year 2019-2020 mid-year budget report. Number 2 is presented and provided to present and provide direction to staff in addressing the forecasted budget deficit due to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is Mr. Warren, and just want to thank him ahead of time for all the work, which I know has been a ton, to get this ready for us tonight. So thank you in advance.
Very welcome, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Good evening. So first of all, I know it's late. I'll try to keep my comments quick and brief as possible. You may recall back on March 10th, we presented your mid-year budget report number 1, which we thought that would be it. About a week later, the forecasts of that report became grossly obsolete. So that's why we're here tonight, to kind of give you an update on where we think we're going to land as of June 30th of this year. So the purpose of the report is to answer 2 primary questions. One is, how is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting the economy and also the city's budget? With that, I'll open up the presentation. And oops, just a second. Here we go. So there was a lot of discussion earlier. I don't need to go through all the things that are going on, the impact of the healthcare system, shelter in place, businesses having to either close or minimize operations. The League of California Cities, you may have seen, conducted a study of all cities in the state of California. I think it was about 92% reporting that the hit, and this is an estimated hit to all cities in the state of California, is approximately $7 billion over this fiscal year and next fiscal year. Pretty staggering. 90% of the cities that reported indicated that either staff cuts or services will be needed to be made in order to balance their budgets if financial aid is not received from the federal government or elsewhere. Cities that rely heavily on sales tax or transient occupancy tax or TOT tax will be hit the hardest, and unfortunately that's us. It was stated earlier by, I think it was Mr. Grobish, that the city of Placerville lives and dies by sales tax, and that's very true. Looking at unemployment just real quick, we've had some great performance over the last 10 years. The city of Placerville had an unemployment rate of 3.3%, which really, we haven't had those kind of rates since the late 60s, 1960s. But we anticipate our unemployment rate could reach around 10 or just above 10% here in the next month or 2. Your sales tax, as you know, is our most significant local economic indicator. It represents 57% of your general fund. We had a good quarter as of December 31st. The receipts increased by 11.33% or $150,000. However, it did include about $189,000 in positive adjustments from a prior quarter, which overestimated it wasn't directly from that quarter. So when you take those adjustments out, it actually equated to a 2.92% decrease. So we were kind of entering into a softening period here in Placerville, and actually throughout the state that's starting to happen before COVID-19. So statewide, decent growth, 6.47%, but I suspect other agencies also had one-time adjustments like the one that happened in Placerville. Real quick, just as a reminder of who generates your sales tax, auto dealers, building and construction, and your county pool, which is primarily online sales. That sector is growing because of online sales and recent legislation. And so about 2/3 of your sales tax comes from those 3 sectors. And so as we go through this, keep that in mind. Your top 25 sales tax producers are listed here, same as the last report, but just as a reminder, thankfully, all of your top 25 businesses are still operating at least partially right now. The finance department did do a survey back in early April, and we surveyed Broadway, Main Street, and Forney Road and Placerville Drive. You have 404 businesses in those areas, and right now 150 are open, or 37.13%. 254 are closed, or about 62. So about 2/3 of your businesses right now aren't even operating. However, some of those businesses don't generate sales tax. Jumping over to the state tax deferment program. So you may have heard through two executive orders by the governor, effective March 30th, all taxpayers who file a return less than $1 million will have automatically an additional 3 months to file their tax return through July 31st. Your consultant HDL estimates that cash flow hits a little over $1.1 million over that 90-day period. And then the second one is effective April 2nd. Small businesses with less than 5 million in taxable annual sales can take advantage of a 12-month interest repayment for up to $50,000 in sales tax liability. The estimated hit based on HDL's analysis is $539,000, about $500,000 over a 12-month period. The challenge with that particular one isn't just cash flow, because most of the revenue will be received after August. We can't book that in fiscal year 19-20, even though that's when it was generated. So that revenue, that $539,000, will actually be booked in fiscal year 2021. So when we go into the forecast for this fiscal year and next fiscal year, that is one of the contributing factors. HDL did provide us with the growth factors or loss factors by business sector. So you can see, again, we mentioned the importance of our auto and building construction. You can see in the blue, first quarter, not so bad. COVID hit at the end of the first quarter of 2020, but we are seeing auto sales. Now this is statewide, not just Placerville, so it's kind of an average, approximately 12%. Second quarter, though, 55%, staggering. Business industry, 7% down first quarter, 40% down second quarter. And you can see the rest of them, most are losers other than food and drugs. The one real big winner is state and county pools, and that's because of online sales tax. They estimate more people are going to be shopping online, which appears to be holding true. This slide just shows you basically historical growth compared to the 7.5 on average total tax growth loss in the first quarter and 36% total loss estimated in the second quarter. And then moving into fiscal year 2020, they also looked forward for that 12-month period. You can see overall your like auto transportation down 6.3%. And this is on top of what we already lost in this fiscal year, 1920 at that point. Let's see, building construction, -1%. Business and industries, 5.4, and you can go all the way through. Again, state and county pools is the winner, 7.3% increase. Overall, a 1.5% decrease year over year. But again, the basis is a down year. So overall, a decrease when you look at the 2-year growth. Your sales tax for general fund was 5.1 million. We forecast for 1920 it'll be 4.7 million, or a $351,000 decrease, or 6.84% year-over-year loss. And then you can see the historical there. At that point, if those forecasts hold true, we're going to be operating kind of in the 17-18 realm. When you look at it from a, adjusted for inflation, you're looking at a 12-13 realm. The other impacts COVID-19 is having is on our transient occupancy tax, or TOT. HDL also estimated that TOT across the state will decline to by 75%. For the actually for April and May. June, they're hoping it'll start to stabilize, but for April and May, definitely down approximately 75%. Your highway user tax, or gas tax, the League of California Cities estimates between 15 and 30% beginning in May through June, and then entering into fiscal year 2021. We estimated for our analysis, we kind of took the middle of the road at 20% for our analysis. And then SB1, or the RMRA funding for transportation, down between 10 and 20%. Again, we took the middle of the road at 15, starting in May. Your budget, which you adopted last June, was 20.6 million. Of that amount, 9.2 million was for general fund. It included a $75,000 contingency, $111,000 for equipment and projects, which was planned out of fund balance. So basically planned deficit spending, because we built up our fund balance at that point. We also were planning on a pickup truck being purchased out of fund balance from prior fiscal year. And we have a $15,000 safety facility needs assessment study that we're partnering with the fire district coming out of fund balance. Full disclosure, our budget does not include GASB 75 pre-funding, but we do pay as you go. We assume $75,000 contingency being burned down through this year. Because of what's going on with sales tax, we anticipate the general fund is going to have to transfer in an additional $140,000 to our Measure J, which augments public safety salaries and benefits. And because schools closed earlier, we have a school resource officer, or SRO, which is funded through the high school. Because the schools closed 2 months early, that means there's 2 months worth of funding not available for that operation. So that's a $22,000 hit there. So again, the general fund transferring $22,000 to that fund. Just a reminder of your general fund dollar, how it's allocated in this slide. So let's look at the kind of the bottom line. You can see that our revised budget, we had $157,000 in planned deficit spending, but other than that, we were balanced. But now what we're seeing, based on the COVID-19 impact of having a deficit over a little over $1 million, your general fund currently has an operating reserve of about 1.6. So if this holds true, there's a good chance that we're going to burn through that reserve by about $1 million. And we're looking at ways of trying to slow that impact, but for discussion purposes, that's what we're looking at. And this graph just kind of shows you historically, we've had some good years between after the Great Recession started to heal in 11-12 all the way through 18-19, but now we have this big gap we're dealing with. Drilling down to your revenues, the only ones I really, we talked about sales tax. There's about a $500,000 loss there. Director Rivas revised his construction permit estimates as well as his other development fees, and we've adjusted those here for discussion purposes. So a little over $500,000 below budget is what we're estimating. Expenditures, we talked about those transfers out to Measure J as well as our SRO grant fund. And other than that, the expenditures are pretty much the same as what we forecasted back in March. So as a recap, $1 million forecasted deficit is primarily due to $157,000 in planned deficit spending, and then about $854,000 in anticipated impacts from COVID-19 pandemic. Our reserves 1.6 billion, or 16.94% of expenditures. Cleve and I, Mr. Morris and I talked about, we really don't want to go below 10% going into fiscal year 2021. And we recommend right now that you transfer the balance of your reserve for economic uncertainty, which is $339,000, to the general fund to shore that reserve up to bring it close to 10%. That would bring it to $947,000. Any questions at this point? Okay, moving on to Measure J. We talked about the hit in sales tax, the loss as of June 30th, 123,000. And you can see the numbers below. Measure H, a loss of approximately $111,000. What we plan on doing there, plan on meeting with Rebecca Neves, your city engineer, and Cleve Morris to talk about what projects can we defer for right now. We talked about at the last council meeting, deferring our capital improvement program budget process to the fall until we know better of how our sales tax is going to perform in 2021. So Measure L, similar story. We're showing a loss of about $210,000. Again, we're looking at, possibly deferring some projects to shore that up. Water Enterprise Fund, at this point, we're doing okay. We do anticipate, because of the slowing economy, slow pay, no pays, and so more on the cash flow end. But your overall budget, we do anticipate, because of some vacancies in that fund, of having $265,000 for CIP projects, which will help backstop Measure L and Measure H. Sewer Enterprise Fund, similar story. You may recall we transfer in the entire Measure H into the Sewer Enterprise Fund for capital projects. So you can see overall, we're going to be fine. We estimated our budget $506,000 for projects, and the forecast with Sewer Enterprise revenues $529,000. So we'll be okay there. Parking District, we anticipate, activity. You've seen downtown. We anticipate daily parking and lease parking having to do some adjustments, as well as parking citations. That affects your bottom line in the parking fund. And so that second quarter, we anticipate really we're only going to have 1 month to really collect revenue. The first 2 months of that quarter for April, May, really not collecting a whole lot. So what that does is it reduces your net revenue from about 119,000 to 35,000, which means the short term, the funds available for short term capital projects shrinks from 73,000 to 15,000. So what that means is we'll have to fund the difference out of your parking fund balance. The other smaller funds, we've already talked about gas tax, the SRO grant fund. Unless there's any questions, let's move on to the big picture here. So before capital projects, you can see that your revised budget assumed almost $3 million for capital projects and reserve set-asides. And with the impacts of COVID-19, that shrinks down to about a little over $2 million. So, and your revenues overall down by about 4.8%. So closing comments, the local economy has been severely impacted by COVID-19. Those negative impacts are anticipated to continue through the remainder of 2020. The economists are telling us that the second and third quarter are going to be the worst as far as sales tax and just general economic activity. Fourth quarter will be bad, but not as bad. And then in the first quarter of 2021, we'll actually start to see growth again. However, that growth will be based on about a 18-19 growth base. So it'll be reset, if you will. We recommend that certain budget cuts be made to preserve cash liquidity. Cash is king. We want to make sure we don't use too much of our reserves. So some things, again, we recommend that the $339,000 from the Economic Uncertainty Reserve be transferred to the general fund. We'll continue to aggressively seek available operating grants. I know the police department's doing that right now. Our engineering department's looking at capital grants. We need to complete our master fee schedule. We're getting close to that. Discontinue non-health and safety type training unless grant or post-funded. We've talked about that before, just kind of cutting where we can. Defer other non-essential expenses wherever we can in the budget. Discontinue non-health and safety overtime. The next one, keeping the aquatic center closed through the remainder of 2020. That's really twofold. One, a health and safety issue because of COVID, and cost. And Mr. Morris is going to talk more about this in the next item, but the estimated savings by doing that for this aquatic season. So that would be from May through September 7th is about approximately $135,000. Continue with the hiring freeze that we've already kind of implemented. Explore other cost containment measures. So these are things that we do have a collective bargaining process, and we will be working with our employee groups to look at other things as time goes by. So we'll provide another update to you on May 12th. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point. Thank you.
I do have a quick question. The TOT tax, who is the, is that allocated normally to a certain, or is that anybody certain, or does that go into the general fund?
It just goes right into your general fund.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none right now, we'll go ahead and move into public comments.
Public comment is now open for item 12.2. If you are joining by phone, please press *9 to implicate your desire to speak, and I will call upon you using the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by your computer, use the raise hand symbol at the bottom of your screen. Unmute yourself when called upon and voluntarily give your name for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. And we have a public comment from 857.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Good evening, it's Mike Drobish. Hey, we all have to be just so thankful we have Mr. Warren on our side, right? This is the biggest economic collapse any of us will probably ever see in our lifetime. So you need to start right now pinching every penny and dollar and $1,000 that you can. That sign truck that's over there by the caboose saying wash your hands, it's on city property, so hopefully the city isn't paying rent for a truck that is passing a message we all should already know. So if the city's renting that, stopped 2 weeks ago, okay? Anyway, so Mr. Warren is nice and calm, but I'll be brutally honest. This is the biggest existential threat we all are facing. The COVID threat is pennies on the dollar. Everyone's afraid of the COVID. The COVID isn't going to kill us. It's the economic collapse is going to kill us. Get over it. Life doesn't come with airbags. Life is full of risks. For those who want to stay home, do it. For those who can go back to business safely, do it. Because when people run out of options, it gets really crazy really fast. When people start showing up at your door, stealing your stuff, or looking at you as food, you will want the COVID back instead of those people. So get it together. Realize it's the economic collapse that is going to kill us, not the COVID. That's all.
Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, I have a written comment from Sue Rodman.
Okay.
She says, a good presentation on the current state of affairs. Agree with caution going forward.
Okay, thank you.
And I do not see any further comment at this time.
Okay, then we will close public comment and bring it back to City Council for any further comments, prognostications.
Mayor, this is Cleve. Could I just mention quickly the one comment regarding the signboard that is on city property down here on Lower Main? That is a project that was funded by the Marshall Foundation. We are not paying anything for that. So we thank them for that.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I forgot I was going to mention that. I forgot already. Vice Mayor Thomas.
I would like to echo the sentiments of Dave Warren. He is continually over the years has taken a conservative approach to the finances for the city, and it has served us well under many conditions. And in many situations, all the way going back, 10 and 15 years. I truly appreciate your continued effort to operate always in the best interest of the city, which is what we pay you to do, but you do it very well, and you do it in a very conservative nature, and that has made a big difference along the way. And sometimes it's been tough to hear some of your conversations, and sometimes I wanted to argue with you a bit, and I have, but at the same time, I completely respect your position and where you're at and how you've managed the money for this city, and I believe the people of this of our community is far better off having you there. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll just say, Councilmember Borelli. Oh, Patty, you're on. There you go.
Okay. You mentioned, or Dave did, that Cleve would talk to us later on about the pool closure. And I think we got a letter about it from one of our constituents. So do you want to explain it a little bit more, or I don't know what you got planned?
Yeah, but if it's all right, Patty, why don't we wait and move into the next item? We'll discuss that further as far as what we're requesting in terms of the pool.
Okay. Okay.
This is simply a receive and file into this unless there's questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say for hopefully anyone that stayed on, as this is the after effects of what we've been dealing with. We've all had our intellectual conversations, and things are always different in theory than when you actually have to deal with them in practice. And that's what we're going to have to do going forward here. These are real cuts or real ways to find ways to deal with this deficit. And those will affect all of us as residents of Placerville. So again, Dave, thank you for all the work on this, and we'll look forward to, well, not look forward, but we'll see, as we move forward here, what that looks like, the bottom line, as we get more information. So thank you again.
You're very welcome, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dave, thank you for an excellent report. Unfortunately, I'm afraid it's probably accurate. These numbers are going to seriously impact our city. I know it wasn't difficult. I know we worked with you through the 2008 Great Recession, and that was amazingly difficult times. And it took us years to build back from that. We still haven't really built back from that. We're doing more with less people now. There's still dozens of jobs that were never refilled. So I'm afraid that we are faced with another very daunting task. Dave, it just shocks me that how quickly this impact has grown. And let me just kind of clarify for anybody that's listening or going to watch this in the future. These impacts that you have presented to us this evening are a result of an event that started basically the first week of March, or say the second week of March, when the governor started to enact his orders. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you, Councilmember Acuna. Yes, it happened very quickly, and in closing comments in our mid-year budget report, I indicated there was some uncertainty, but quite honestly, I did not see this coming the way it did. And you mentioned the Great Recession. The Great Recession was kind of like a slow-moving train wreck. This was like a high-speed head-on collision. It happened very quickly, and it didn't give us much time to react. And I wish we wouldn't have to dip into reserves like we're talking, but it just happened so fast in order to react and figure out, what does it mean? And so anyway, thank you for your comments.
Dave, and again, the total deficit, the projected deficit to the end of this fiscal year is how much?
The deficit is $1 million, to your general fund only, is $1,023,495.
So 1.2.
We also estimate your deficit going into fiscal year 2021 at 1.2 million, and that is very conservative. That doesn't include any equipment, no training, it's just basic operations. So it's probably closer to, if you built a regular budget, more like 1.5 million.
Okay. So again, and as you mentioned, the difficulty is we're almost at the end of our fiscal year. So we've gone through all of our spending, and we can't just also, oh, Dave, don't, somebody's not going to get a new dump truck and the police aren't going to get 2 new squad cars. All of those choices are all the easy cuts, or well, that we didn't have a plush budget to begin with. But there are no easy cuts. People think, oh, well, the city just won't get a new truck or they won't paint a building. We weren't doing that stuff anyway, correct?
Yeah, the 1.2 million doesn't include any bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And I also want to remind folks, we have 17 less positions than we did in 08. So we're much leaner and meaner already.
Oh, yeah.
So to cut is going to be more painful.
That's hugely important. Thank you very much for reminding me, Dave. That's a lot of people. And so we, again, don't have the luxury that the council had 10 years or 12 years ago.
Correct.
When is your next report due from the state as far as our sales tax report?
Mr. Morris and I are meeting with HTL in mid-May, and we're hoping to have more information from them as far as what our growth loss factors are and growth factors into fiscal year 2021. So we can provide that information to the council shortly thereafter. Okay. We'll also be watching what's going on in the local economy. We may have to adjust down or up depending on what's going on. I'm hoping, well, let me back up. There's one piece of information I left out, and that is HDL's forecasts were based on a reopening June 1st. So, and that's statewide. So if for some reason we reopen a little sooner, that would help. And I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying purely from a number standpoint. Their assumption is that basically we're shut down through June 1st.
Okay. So when do you anticipate getting, have you got the fourth quarter numbers from the state, correct?
Correct.
When do you anticipate the first quarter of 2020 from the state?
The first quarter of 2020 we'll have in May.
In May,
so
okay.
Late May.
And I don't mean to belabor this, but the tax reports are always painfully slow in coming. And people need to understand that too. This is another challenge that you face and that we face is we have to sit on pins and needles for weeks, months to get this data.
Right.
So it doesn't not make this any bit easier. Okay. When do you need any other decisions from us? Is there a timeline? Or will you just be reporting at our next meeting?
I'm going to, Dave, if I can comment on that, I'm going to ask for some direction on your next agenda item.
Okay. I had one last question for Dave.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's good. I like seeing you, Mr. Morris. I miss seeing you. That's a nice curtain you have behind you, by the way, too. Mr. Warren?
Yes, sir.
What's the debt service currently at the water reclamation facility? What's our either annual, monthly?
Debt service is approximately $2 million.
And that payment is due how often?
And actually it's more, excuse me, it's about 2.5. The debt service, the primary, your SRF loan is due, the 1.5 million is due in August. And the remainder is broken up into 2 separate payments, August and February.
So just the money we need going to the state of California for a water plant that regularly wins awards. Something to explore. Maybe the governor can give us some debt forgiveness as a small community.
Interesting thought.
Bad idea to pursue.
That is an interesting thought. However, it would be stuck in our sewer fund, the payment for that.
We can get it out. We have ways. This is an emergency, Dave.
True.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Appreciate your dedication to the difficult situation.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, any other comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Dave. We will move on to item 12.3, which is review and approve potential cost-saving measures to address budget shortfalls. And Mr. Morris has this one for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This will be fairly quick because we do not have all of the detail that we need right now. We do have some direction that we will move forward with. I want to emphasize a few things, and Dave covered most of these in his report. But I just want to emphasize a few things and then just get your approval with the direction we're going. So I'm going to take these in a little bit different order. We are, as Dave had mentioned, looking at meeting with our employee groups to discuss personnel cost containment measures that we can do to control this. I think the number, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the number is 70% of our expenditures are personnel related. So to have any type of meaningful cost containment almost has to affect personnel, unfortunately. Overtime, I have already, as Dave mentioned, instituted the elimination of all non-safety related overtime. And there are some areas once in a while where we have a case where overtime, I would hope that it's all essential, but there is some discretion in that we have put in place to hopefully avoid some of the overtime that we are experiencing. Hiring freeze, as you know, from time to time, we do have regular hiring going on. We have vacant positions. I have implemented a hiring freeze, and so I'd ask that if you will, ratification of that action. The last and probably of most discussion that people may be interested in is the idea that Dave brought up that we would close our aquatic center this year. This is not an easy thing for us to do. We know that that is very popular during the summer, both for lap swim for some adults and others, and then for the youth that like to come there for recreation. It's not an easy decision. However, we based our decision on a couple issues. Number one, we would not be able to open it right now. And based on some of the indications we heard from the governor's speech today, it may be a few months before we would be able to open it. Given that and the fact that it is a significant cost to the city each year to keep that open, direct costs, as Dave has spelled out for the season, is about $135,000. That's about $28,000 in current fiscal year and $107,000 next fiscal year. So for the total of $135,000. So our recommendation is that we make that move now, make the recommendation and get approval from you to close the aquatic center this summer, or not open it up, I should say. The other reason we're asking for that decision now, even though some may say it's a little bit early, we need to be aware of our hiring process for lifeguards, training of lifeguards, and et cetera. Don't want to hire them if we're not going to use them, give them the opportunity to look elsewhere. And if we do want to hire them, if we have to go through that training, we need to look at the timing of that training when we do it. You may have heard in the past, we've talked about a higher cost that we would save if we didn't have the pool. If we completely didn't have that, that is true. But there are some costs that we still have. Obviously, we still keep water in the pool. That means we still keep chemicals in the pool. There's some maintenance that our maintenance staff do to keep that going, even when it is not operating. So that's why you're seeing a number somewhat less than 200,000 for the entire year. So with that, that is pretty much it. We will be coming back to you at your next meeting with an update, and we will continue with an update on this as we go forward. I don't see an ending date for it right now, so we'll continue to update and give you more ideas of what we can do to control these costs. And we definitely will have something going by the time we get to the coming year's budget in order to save us additional costs and come in with a balanced budget. So happy to answer any questions, as well as our other staff. I see Terry Zeller, our Community Services Director, is on. If you have questions regarding the aquatic center or other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleve. Questions for staff at this moment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to public comment.
Public comment is now open for item 12.3, and we'll now accept 857.
Good evening. Can you hear?
We can. Good evening.
Okay. excellent job. I'm so proud of you guys. This is crazy time, and you guys are doing an awesome job. So sleep well tonight, knowing that you're doing great. The economics of this thing is what scares me to death. The bug doesn't scare me at all. This is the biggest economic collapse you're probably going to ever see. I mean, Dave Warren was talking about, oh, the next, cycle, we're going to have a downturn. I don't think anyone even considered what this could possibly do to us. So we need to start thinking right now, cutting and slashing and saving every penny, every dollar, because we don't know what it's going to look like in the fall, let alone a year from now. So freeze all pay raises, all those contracts, negotiate with the unions, try to get some clawbacks or reductions, do whatever you can. We're all in this together. They might complain, but at least they have a job. And there might be somebody there that will take their job at half price. So if they want to complain, just put that right back at them. Definitely close the pool. That is a luxury. That is a nicety, not a must-have. If you don't like it, go down to Coloma and swim in the river. Just again, bank every single dollar that you can think of. Think ahead. Don't think, 2 months from now. Think 6 months from now, a year from now, and just pinch every penny. That's all. Thanks. Great job, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, I have a written comment from Sue Rodman.
Okay.
She says, regarding number 1, closing the aquatic center for the 2020 season is a bitter pill, but necessary. Regarding number 2, definitely need a hiring freeze with the exception for public safety. And number 3, limit overtime to only safety emergencies. She says, add 2 more items. Number 4, where possible, do all engineering design and project management in-house. Perhaps this is a time when Placerville can get engineering design work done ahead for projects that are put on hold while waiting to see how finances work out. And number 5, where legally possible and costs can be reduced, delay or suspend services from consultants, for example, HDL companies, Bartle Wells, etc.
Thank you, Sue, for those comments.
No other public comment.
Okay, with that, we'll bring it back to the council for further discussion. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I find myself agreeing with Michael Drobish all night long here, which is, he's usually got some great ideas along the way there. I agree with him 100% in terms of, cutting where we can, making every possible connection. I've been through this in business. I've been through this with friends in businesses. The preventative measures we can put in ahead of this is going to pay off dividends in the long run. And I agree with Dave that this was a high-speed head-on collision rather than a slow train wreck. And I'm not an economist. I listen to him. I don't even want to play one. But I am going to give you my opinion in that this could get worse really quickly rather than just stay stagnant or get better. I think our predictions are could be, and I have nothing to base this on. It sounds like I'm speaking from emotion, and part of it is, but part of it's my experience from being in business for many, many years and working with a lot of different other businesses in these situations, especially around 2010. I was in several business groups and we talked about this whole thing, and being ahead of that curve makes so much difference rather than chasing it. And we're in this position on this precipice where we're kind of like this, $1 million here and $1 million there, and all of a sudden, we don't have any money, and this could get worse. And And I don't know where to get it. Even HDL, you know, can we renegotiate our contract with HDL? Either we cancel it or maybe they work a deal for the next 6 months. There's so many different people that we have contracts with that we could work out. Even the parking company, the meters and what we're doing there and how those are being handled. You know, it's almost, you know, how many different places do we have contracts that we could renegotiate or put some payments off to the end and, you know, let them help us go through this time and work with them. You know, they're suffering just like we are. So they're having the same challenges. However, we're also, you know, we're working with people with their water bills and their, you know, sewer bills and such. And so it is, I can't begin to tell you, I've been through this experience in 2010. And in 2000, I bought my business just right when the trade centers hit. And right after that, you know, there was a bit of a downturn. And I can't tell you how important it is to find to sit down and I know the city has done this, but sit down and reevaluate again, because I find that you know, only when the pressure's on do you really find those places that you could save money. And there's always, you could dig a little bit deeper and find a little more money, and it is there. And I implore our department heads to look at that. I would rather end up at the end of this with a little extra money in the bank and having worked really hard to make cuts as opposed to squeaking by or finding out we didn't have the money to get there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Council Member.
Thank you, Cleve, for the report. Couple questions for Mr. Zeller. And this is just to kind of address I totally support the need to not open the aquatic center this year, but what's the normal open period for our city pool?
It's usually right after Memorial Day or early June.
And it closes on Labor Day weekend, correct?
That's usually the rule of thumb, yes.
Okay, so Labor Day to Memorial Day. So it's a short period to begin with.
Yes.
Okay, and I have another question, Terry, and it centers around adult sports and thinking about one of the sports that does require our maintenance workers to take a lot of care, and that's the adult softball program at Lions Park. Is adult softball going to be allowed with the regulations that appear to be that are currently in place? And would there be any substantial savings if we close that season for this year?
Right now, what we're planning on doing is our spring season would have already started right now, so that has been scrapped, but we're looking at a tentative summer league and a fall league. And the trick with the ball fields is that you don't really get that much savings because you still have to mow the grass. We're also in the middle of a turf renovation project to try to get rid of some of those issues we had last year. And so the investment's already been made in that. And it's mostly field dragging and prep work. So it can be some savings, but the adult softball league is actually a money maker after you look at the costs that go into it.
Okay, I just kind of I'm glad thank you. Those were the points that I wanted to bring up. And just lastly, just for the council and the city manager, I'll go back to the last item and say that in my years on the council, I never saw Dave Warren so calm as he was proposing that we were going to have to dig so deeply into the use of our economic reserve funds. And the thought of spending almost all of that funding just to get through this year is very, very alarming to me. It's something that I've never expected to ever hear. But again, I think that proves the high-speed train wreck theory. Yeah. Thank you, Terry. Good to see you tonight.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you, Mr.
Member Taylor.
Couple comments. We we did receive some written comments about closing the aquatic center. And I just, I want to let people know that this is a bitter pill to swallow, and I am really sad about that. I know that the caller earlier mentioned that it's a luxury, and I think that for all the parents that are home right now with kids that don't have access to playgrounds or school or their friends, the pool might seem like it's a real necessity, especially as the weather gets really hot. But I do think that given our, the enormity of our current crises, that this is something that we have to do. And I support all of the other proposals. I had one question about Sue Rodman's comment for Rebecca Neves with the in-house engineering and design. My understanding was that we were not doing in-house, or, I know we do some, but a lot of our design is done out of house because of staff time. Is this something that we could do as a cost saving measure?
Yes, hi, sorry. Yeah, we could actually. As far as doing some in-house design, there's actually a fair amount of projects that we're already bringing in-house. With a lot of the projects that we have on the books, they're federally and state funded. And what that means is that there is a lot more process involved, and it's a lot more taxing on staff. And so there's been definitely a need for having that additional support outside of the office. A lot of our consultants, they function essentially as an extension of staff in a lot of ways. But as far as what we could bring in-house, we have brought in-house. We have brought in several sewer projects and some water line projects and some roadway maintenance projects in-house as well.
Okay, so is there room to bring more in-house, or are you kind of maxed out?
No, we are looking at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a cost recovery measure and actually there's a couple of cost recovery measures that we're looking. So there's, for example, utilizing the wharf staff to help deliver some of the CIP projects at the wharf too. So staff is, billing towards those projects. They've certainly put in the time and the effort to set up the preparation for, a servicing or what have you that's actually going on the wharf as part of an approved CIP.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just kind of, overall, I agree with the comments made today. I think we should be taking decisive action and finding all cost savings possible so that hopefully we can make the pain short instead of having to close the pool for multiple seasons or have long-term cuts to staff and our ability to provide services that linger for years. So I support all of these actions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. Any other comments?
Mike?
Yes, Councilmember Borelli.
I feel the same way. I tell you, I feel so sorry for our younger population and everything that's happened from, having to leave school, and this, oh my God, and I'm so sorry for the seniors and what they're missing out on, and but this is just something that can't be helped, and now having to close the pool and they can't go swimming. I mean, that's going to be the final blow for a lot of them, but they'll survive and turn on the sprinklers, I guess. But I just want to make it really clear to the city that we're just, we're behind the 8 ball, and they just need to understand that we're just trying to keep the city afloat. So there's just drastic measures we have to take this time that we never had to before. So I approve of everything that you guys are talking about wanting to do too.
Thank you, Patty. A question for Cleve. Do we need to take a motion here, or have what we said provided you with the direction that you need going forward here?
I would request a motion, especially due to the aquatic centers, the primary one, but if you can make a motion to approve all of those. Yeah.
Council, I know, Vice Mayor Thomas brought up the idea of really reevaluating existing whether, HDL or whatever else. Do we want to add that into what's been listed here in terms of a one over as well with any existing contracts that might be able to have some renegotiation happen and maybe some more potential cost savings?
Mr. Mayor, I'd go ahead and make a motion to approve the staff's recommendation with the addition of that item, that staff also go ahead and review all existing contracts for cost, saving, potential, and relative need, given the emergency situation.
Thank you, Mark. We have a first.
One more thing. There's been some talk about updating fee schedules. And I was wondering where we are in that and if that should be added to the list as well.
I can mention quickly, or Dave can respond to this too. We are in the middle of our master fee schedule update, and we will do our best to expedite that with between what else is going on here. So we will move that forward.
I'll go ahead and second the motion.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Further comments? Okay, seeing none. Regina, will you call roll, please?
Mayor Saragosa,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Aye.
Councilmember Acuna,
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff, for putting this all together. I know it's been a hectic month, so I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this to get us prepared and to move forward. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 13, which are council reports, and I'll ask everyone to be brief here since I know we're late into the evening already. So Transit Authority first.
Nothing to report.
Okay, perfect. Transportation.
We haven't had a meeting. I will say this, that Mr. Deloria has sent us, he keeps us informed through emails, things that he thinks that we need to know.
Okay, thank you, Patty. LAFCO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. LAFCO did meet last week. We did a Zoom meeting and went over and adopted the budget for LAFCO for the coming year. The budget was impacted by the COVID incident. Staffing has been reduced for the time being. The important news is that LAFCO staff recognized the impacts to all of the supporting agencies, and our contribution towards LAFCO for the coming year will be very close to, if not the same, as it was this year. So that was about $62,000. That's our portion to be a member of LAFCO. The operation is primarily being all done by remote, and Jose, and we have one executive assistant it will be the new staffing for the balance of the year.
What is our cost, Mark?
Approximately 62,000, Patty.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, council member. For SACOG, we had an update on the Green Means Go from the lobbyists in Sacramento in terms of that 700 million that our greater region is looking for from the legislature. As you can imagine, with COVID-19, the ask of a $700 million ask is daunting. I think it will put a lot of pressure on SACOG really to see how we meet our MTP SCS standard goals as we move forward here. I mean, I guess the one thing with that is misery loves company, is that we won't be the only cog in the state that is having the same problems with this, because we're going to need state help in order to meet those ambitious goals. So more there as we move forward, but I think it's going to be challenging to get that type of money allocated in this year's budget. Fire Safe Council.
Just the council continues to try to be on top of things and keeps us all informed. I just want to reiterate, boy, fire season is almost upon us, and we really need to stay vigilant and continue with what we were. It's hard to keep up the momentum, I realize that, but we just have to keep on top of it. So
No, you're right, Patty. We'll move from one crisis into, the next looming one.
Right.
Okay, we'll go move on to item 14, request for future agenda items. Does any council member have a item they wish to move forward for a future agenda item? All right, seeing none. City manager or staff reports?
Nothing from us this evening, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So upcoming items, I'll just name a couple here. Clay Street Cultural Studies Amendment, maintenance agreement with Caltrans, WPI Phase 2 Memorial Trailhead plaque. That'll be a fun one. Measure J report and an HDL audit contract. Some of the upcoming items that we'll have, as well as I'm sure we'll have another COVID-19 update as we move forward here. I think it's just going to be part of our usual council meetings as we move through this and navigate those waters. So more to come there as well. So at 9:51, I will adjourn this meeting of the Placerville City Council. Thank you, everyone, tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.